We have one more minute.
Sue, I took the van and Sue has straight.
Wow. It wasn't terrible. It's just it was the first welcome back to winter driving.
Did you get the? Yeah. You drove in the dark.
I did. It was dark.
So did
yeah,
you get the Star Wars effect?
Yes, the Star Wars effect. It kind of makes me feel sick.
Yeah.
And I'm never sure if sometimes the brights make it worse.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
You know?
Absolutely.
Yeah, but then you see it here on the side. The way that. All right. Well, it's 9:30. Is everyone here? I think so. Okay. I'll call the meeting to order. We'll take public comments. Who's online? Do we have
Kylie and Joe at the moment.
Okay. All right. Does anybody have any changes or additions to the agenda?
Just one change, since it was noticed as part of the public meeting, the going away for Chris. Following the meeting, we're going to have to cancel that. Chris is not available anymore. So she's got grandbaby duty. Her grandbaby that she has been anxiously expecting arrived on Friday, and so she'll be spending time with grandbaby. So that noticed portion of the agenda will not occur this afternoon. Any other changes or additions?
Okay, how about introductions? Go ahead and start. We'll go around. Okay, I'm Ann Kish. I'm from Dillon, and I'm chairing the meeting today because Aaron isn't able to join us today.
Bruce Newell.
Kenny Marlich from Bozeman.
Elsie Arts and State Superintendent. Marla Stark, State Library.
Ken Wall, at-large commissioner from Missoula.
Jamie Doggett, White Sulphur Springs.
And Jenny Stapp, State Librarian. And we have some new staff introductions that we'll do more formally after we introduce other members of the audience.
Tracy Cook, State Library.
And I'm Melissa Williams. I'm the new Central Services Administrator.
Evan Hammer, Digital Library Administrator.
Hi, nice to meet you. Randy, do you want to introduce yourself? Just say who you are.
Yeah. Randy Zalvo from Bannock Communications. Good morning, I'm Stephanie Brown with Bannock.
Heather Burcham, also with Bannock.
Eric Heidel, also with Bannock.
Hillary Frank, Lane County Library, Chanel Kathleen.
Janine Brookie, Phillips County Library, Malta, Golden Plains Library Federation Coordinator.
Kara Orban, State Library.
Tom Reyna, State Library.
Sarah Parrish, State Library Public.
Stanley Munson, State Library.
Is anybody on mic online that wants to introduce themselves?
Honora Bray from Missoula Public Library and the Tamarack Federation.
Good morning.
Morning.
This is Kylie McGregor with the State Library Montana Shared Catalog. I'm the new trainer.
Oh, good.
Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
And this is Joe Flick. I'm your CE coordinator here at the State Library.
Hey, Joe. Glad you could come. Okay. Should we move to some formal staff introductions?
Sure. First of all, it's my pleasure to welcome Melissa Williams. As you all know, Chris is retiring at the end of this month, and we are just incredibly fortunate to have hired Melissa. She comes to Montana from Oklahoma by way of Texas. She previously worked for the Peerview Health Center with the county and has been with the Governor's Budget Office for the past 3 years. So she brings experience with the state budgeting system as well as the legislative process. She's worked with both sides of the executive and the legislature, and we're so fortunate to have that experience. I think one of the things that impressed the hiring committee the most about Melissa was that she has a passion for public service and expressed to us a real interest in working for an organization that's dedicated to the mission. And that's certainly something that we were looking for. We didn't want just an accountant. We wanted someone who shares the mission and vision of the State Library. we're very grateful that Melissa's had at least a couple weeks to cross-train with Chris. Chris will be physically with us through the end of this week, and you'll see her a little bit later on in the agenda. But we're just thrilled to have Melissa with us, so welcome. Tom, do you want to introduce Stanley?
Sure. MSL.IT welcomes Stanley as a 30-hour-a-week employee in early September. He previously was a student intern on Aspen. He started that in May. He was critical in getting that up live. And he'll be at 30 hours a week. And he's also going to school. And he'll have an associate's in networking and programming in May 2019. So he has a lot of, he's doing great to desktop and he's doing great to web development. So we're really happy to have him.
Super.
Welcome, Stanley.
Thanks for the Thank you.
Oh, come on, we need a speech. No.
We didn't do that to you.
I'll give a speech. We are so grateful to have another IT person.
We are.
Yes.
Wonder what things we need to fix first.
Yeah. Jessica, do you want to introduce Sarah?
Sure. Sarah Karish. She's our new readers advisor, and she joined us officially, I believe, in July. And prior to that, she was here as a temp, helping with the front desk and some other duties. She was at Lewis and Clark Library here in Helena in public services, and before that, she was at Polson, and she was the technology trainer there. So she worked with some assistive devices for low vision patrons. And Sarah will be for our patrons with the last names P through Z. But she'll talk to anybody who calls in, and she's had really good feedback so far. Our patrons love her, and she's doing really great, and we're really happy to have her. Welcome.
Excellent.
And then via the wonders of virtual technology, Kara is going to introduce Kylie, whose picture you can see on the screen.
Yes, we're so pleased to have Kylie McGregor with us, and you heard Kylie's voice on the meeting a minute ago. And Kylie comes to us from the Belgrade Community Library. She is actually remotely based in Belgrade, and she did a variety of things at Belgrade that benefit Share Catalog. She worked with desk, but she also was responsible for troubleshooting their network and technology issues in Belgrade. And prior to Belgrade, she worked at the Democratic Library in Boston, where she attended library school. So she has a variety of experience, and she's also well familiar with Montana Share Catalog and resource sharing through the BridgerNet group. So we're just really pleased with all the experience that Kylie brings to the Share Catalog, and happy to have her.
Thank you. Thank you. Welcome, Kylie.
She says thanks. Then we've also had a couple of people, Joe and Kylie, both say welcome to other people also.
And I just want to remind the commission, as we were coming out of the impacts of the budget cuts, we prioritized 2 positions to rehire as soon as we were able. The most pressing one was, of course, the reader advisor position, and the second was IT support. And so we're really, really grateful to be able to have those positions filled. We're projecting a little bit of personal services budget that we can go ahead and fill another position. Staff are talking about some admin support that we need as the next priority to fill. We have a lot of our professional staff doing a lot of administrative responsibilities, and that's quite a workload for us. So we're going to be looking at how we can fill that kind of position as soon as possible. It will require us rewriting a job profile, having a position reclassified, but that is in the works as well. And then we had a couple more guests join us who will join us a little bit later in the agenda. Donna Sorensen from the School for the Deaf and Blind, and one of their students, Adriana.
Yay.
Welcome.
Welcome. Thank you for coming. Okay, we'll move on to approval of the minutes. Has everybody had a chance to look at the August 8th meeting draft minutes?
I move for approval.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Great. Did we have any public comment on the meetings and minutes? And then we have the June 13th meeting. That's a final meeting, so we don't need any. The final minutes, we don't need any. That's right. Action on that. That's just for all of you to see. So we'll move into the State Library report. And I'll turn it over to Jenny. Thanks.
I'm going to try to keep this brief because we have a hefty agenda to get through today, but if there's anything that I don't bring up that you want us to talk about, if you have any questions on from the reports, please do let me know. The first thing I want to touch upon is progress that we're finally making on this idea of a reporting system. And I've shared with you in your commission materials a spreadsheet that shows some of the different kinds of data that we collect pertaining to the Montana Shared Catalog specifically. We are choosing to start developing a reporting system around the Montana Shared Catalog data elements that we report as part of our LSTA annual report. The reason we're choosing that is that the LSTA report is something that we have to report annually, and the types of data related to the shared catalog are complex. They come from a variety of sources. They represent both quantitative and qualitative data, and so this would represent one of the greatest challenges that we would have to pull together in terms of the sources and the types of data that we would want to compile into a reporting system that could provide more insights on the staff time and monetary resources that go to support the Montana Shared Catalog, and then the ability to compare that information to the impact that the Montana Shared Catalog has for patrons around the state. So it's incredibly challenging to kind of wrap our heads around how we can collect all of this data in a timely fashion, keep that data up to date. We're still wrestling with whether or not that data all needs to reside in a central database, whether or not some of the data could be pulled instantaneously from its existing sources, and then importantly, what kind of user interface we could overlay on top of that data to help us make use of the data and visualize that data for reporting to the commission, for our own management work and so forth. So we've had a couple of meetings about this, and I can say we're still sort of scratching our heads about where to start, but this gives an example of the complexities of what we would like to pull together into a reporting system, and to help kind of be that really efficient, practical planning and reporting tool that we're hoping to have.
Jenny, when you do the report to LISTA, do they give you feedback about anything that they want to know that we're not getting to them? Or
They do. So there is a reporting system that we have to plug all of this data into, and then they spend a good couple of months reviewing that and providing feedback for anything that, in particular, that we haven't reported that they might like to see reported.
Is there anything that stands out to you, something that they're needing that we're not providing?
No, I think we generally provide everything that they're looking for. I think if there's any feedback, it's sometimes that we maybe over-report in certain areas.
Okay.
So, but you know, the fact that we have to go out to all of these different sources every year to try to compile this information, it represents a great workload for all of our LSTA funded staff who are having to collect and then manage this kind of data. So if we can streamline that process, simplify it, it would be a significant workload decrease, but also I think a planning and reporting benefit to all of us. Something I just wanted to make the commission aware of. There are in at least 3 states now challenges to article content in statewide database subscriptions, one in Colorado, one in Utah, and one now in Virginia, where either an organization or a parent representing an organization has gone to a library or a school and challenged an article that's found within the databases that are made available through those states' statewide database contracts. Right now in the state of Utah, the EBSCO databases for school libraries are offline. They voted to take the entire database suite down while they're trying to wrestle with the issue of this kind of challenge. So, and how states are handling these situations vary from state to state. They vary from database provider to database provider. These organizations are seeking a lot of media attention when they're making these kinds of challenges. The reason I wanted to bring this to your attention, Montana, of course, doesn't have the statewide database contracts any longer, so we wouldn't necessarily face that specific kind of challenge. Depending, I don't know if Trails would have that kind of potential with the academic databases or not. I do know some public libraries make use of those. The one kind of statewide content that the state library helps to administer is our shared ebook collection through Montana Library to Go. Montana Library to Go does have a collection development policy that's been agreed to by all of the participating libraries. And for your knowledge, the challenge process that's outlined in that collection development policy would elevate any kind of challenge that was ultimately pressed to the state library and to the State Library Commission to ultimately resolve. So, I'm not hearing anything about challenges to statewide ebook collections, but I think it's something for us all to have in the back of our minds. Were something like that to happen, I could certainly foresee it happening based on what we're seeing around the database content right now.
What's the nature of the challenges? And what are they challenging specifically?
These articles have had to do with homosexuality primarily, and people challenging having access to those articles in a school setting, a K-12 school setting. Any other questions about that issue? Like I said, nothing of concern for us now, but I wanted you all to be aware that there is a process in place for some of that shared statewide content to be challenged that ultimately comes back to this body.
Has there ever been a challenge to any material from the Library of the Blind?
Not that I've ever been told or made aware of. We do have, as part of our own state libraries collection development policy, a challenge process that does come to me as well as the State Library Commission. So any of those challenges for the state library specifically would come to the commission as well. We've had challenges from time to time. A couple of issues with copyright, especially related to the tribal histories that were put together a number of years ago under No Child Left Behind. It just wasn't clear enough that OPI had copyright authority to grant us permission to make those histories available online. And so we did choose to take those down. We still have them and they can be made available, just not online. And the other times where we've had challenges, it's been to specific web content that an agency has had on its website and has had some concerns about us having it available in our archive. We've shared with them information about how they can make an appeal to the state library for us to consider removing that content, and it's never gone beyond us sharing that appeals process with the agency. Any other questions there? I was incredibly relieved last week when I asked Tracy to confirm that this collection development policy was in place, and in fact it was. So great forward-looking thinking. Just a few more updates. For the first time since 1996, Congress has passed and the President has signed a budget for fiscal year 19. It includes a slight increase in funding for the Institute Museum and Library Services for some of their grant programs and primarily for some of their administrative costs. So the amount of funding that's been appropriated for the Grants to States program is level funded. So good news that it's there, it's in place. We won't receive our official award until probably December or so as they work through some of the administrative processes. But this will certainly be the earliest we've had our fiscal year award in many, many years. So we can begin planning for that. And then the chief officers of state library agencies and the Western Council of State Libraries are going to be actively beginning a campaign to hopefully move beyond requests for simply level funding for the Grants to States program the American Library Association, and with support of states, has asked for level funding for at least a decade now. And level funding is not keeping up with our costs. And so the campaign that we're going to be pursuing would take the total funding for the Grants to States program from about $160 million to $325 million, sort of under the guise of $1 per capita, that we would like to see the U.S.'s libraries funded at $1 per capita. It wouldn't necessarily equate to $1 per capita in every state, but that would be the message around the larger dollar amount. So our states are working with our states' American Library Association chapters, like the Montana Library Association, asking for their support. We hope to get the entire library community on board to talk about this effort to increase the Grants to States program. And we're being very specific that it is funding for the Grants to States program that we're seeking. So that would be the direct funding that comes to state libraries to support library development. Of course, that's a long-term effort, nothing that's going to happen immediately, but CASLA's committed to hiring a consultant and developing a campaign around this effort. The other thing that was passed by Congress last week and also signed by the President, it fell under the Federal Aviation Administration reauthorization, and it was the language from the National Geospatial Data Act. Several of you have heard us talk about this act now for many years, and it was something that was receiving good support within Congress. It came as a little bit of a surprise to me that they embedded the language in another reauthorization effort, but ultimately it passed with largely the language that the geospatial community was hoping that it would contain. A couple of key provisions of the NGDA. It gives more teeth to the Federal Geospatial Data Committee, and it provides more congressional oversight. So through those efforts, we hope to see greater use of an integration of geospatial data and technologies into the various agencies at the national level. It also gives more clout to the National Geospatial Advisory Committee. That's the committee that I sit on. Right now, the work of the committee is largely responding to needs that the FGDC identifies for the committee. And under this new language, it would give the NGAC more authority to make suggestions for work of the FGDC and give us more clout in that effort. And then importantly, it requires federal agencies to work more in partnerships with multi-sectors, including state and local governments. And that's something that we've really pressed for a long time. We know that the data that we collect and manage comes from local communities. We administer it so it can be managed and accessible in statewide layers, and then we share that with our federal partners. We haven't always had the greatest relationships or ability to have influence in that data, and so we hope that this act will give more influence and authority to our work as partners with the federal agencies. Evan, was there anything you wanted to add about the
No, I think
NGDA?
you hit it. It's that framework, a better framework for accountability and development of geospatial data sets. That's what we're looking for.
Right. Anne had asked about something that's in your commission reports around a cost share formula task force. This is something that we've talked about at the State Library for quite some time. We administer our shared programs under a variety of cost share formulas. So for example, the Montana Shared Catalog, what the members contribute is based on a variety of metrics like their number of holdings relative to the other members, their number of users, number of circs, whether or not they make use of other kinds of technologies that are available through the shared catalog, like SIP protocols or self-checkout machines, that kind of thing. The formula that we use to share the cost for the OCLC Group Services contract is different. It's based on number of users, number of FTE, and other kinds of metrics. We have a completely different cost share formula for the Montana Library to Go that's largely based on circulation. These cost share formulas are complex. They're not necessarily consistent. They don't necessarily align with the resources that we're trying to provide. They don't provide the kinds of forward-thinking knowledge that libraries need when they're planning for their budgets. Libraries tell us that they want to have a better sense of what their costs are going to be when they're planning for their budgets. And they're difficult for our staff to administer because they are complex and they vary greatly. The idea behind the cost share formula task force is to identify, we hope, maybe a single cost share formula that we could apply for all of these different kinds of shared resources that libraries that participate in could make use of. The cost share formulas would be more understandable, more transparent, and we hope would give libraries a better ability to plan for what future cost increases might look like as they're preparing their budgets. So that task force has met, I believe, just once at this point. They're in the process of laying out the various concerns that they have so they have a clear idea of what kinds of opportunities they're going to be looking for as they ultimately make recommendations on these various cost share formulas.
Do you anticipate cost formulas will be presented to the Commission for approval?
Well, I think they would at least go to the Network Advisory Council. The Network Advisory Council is the body that has approved the other cost share formulas. I don't recall ever bringing a cost share formula to the Commission.
I don't think it would necessarily be appropriate. What might be appropriate, though, is some sort of a reporting after they've been worked on that we're able to describe the cost share formula, both generally in terms of their fairness and functionality, but in particular, I'd be interested to knowing the thinking that the committee did in regards to the degree to which those cost formula provided or moved towards providing kind of equal access to library services for everyone in the state. Mm-hmm. Because there's an element of sort of information, sufficient information for everyone's needs. And I would hate to have the cost share formulas do anything to take and make the situation less even than it already mm-hmm. is.
Yeah.
And so I think actually that would be appropriate for the Commission to consider.
Jenny?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not interested in who's specifically on there, but what entities are participating in that study?
Librarians from all across the state, okay. Different sizes, different types of libraries, and Kara Orban, who you met, is staffing that okay. task force.
And I'm sure that the committee is cognizant of that. It's yeah. just, I think it would be useful to have that reported back.
You bet. Good. Good. Just a brief update on our work to form a nonprofit. The steering committee will have its next meeting on October 23rd. Stu Wilson from Library Strategies will be back for that meeting. It may be the last meeting of the steering committee as we begin to move towards a board of directors for the nonprofit. Again, the goal is to have a seated board by the end of the calendar year of 5 to 7 members, a couple of members from the state library, one being the state librarian, and a member of the State Library Commission will be ex officio on that board. So far, we have 3 committed people: Sarah Groves, Judy Meadows, the former state law librarian, and a woman by the name of Diane Smith, who lives and works up in Columbia Falls. She is from the telecommunications industry and has worked nationally on telecommunications policy and is very excited to be invited to serve on that board.
I've been serving for the Commission on the sort of the steering committee. I won't be able to attend the October meeting. Have you contacted another commissioner to attend in my stead?
I have not had a chance to ask Jamie, so.
Thanks for throwing me under the bus, pal.
Anytime I see a bus.
Yeah.
So Jamie and I need to talk about that
Yes.
I hope you'll consider showing up in my stead to represent the commission.
We'll see. We'll see.
Anytime.
And then finally, as you all know, as we've been celebrating the 50th anniversary of the Talking Book Library, we've been trying to extend those celebrations beyond Helena and the celebration that we had here in August. So staff and commissioners attended meetings of both the National Federation for the Blind here in Helena, as well as the Montana Association for the Blind in Bozeman. We hosted refreshments at each of those meetings and had a chance to meet and visit with attendees of those conferences. And it was just really, really heartwarming to hear stories about the impact Talking Book Services is having in the lives of those members of those associations. Both Bruce and Kenning were able to attend those events. I don't know if you had anything that you would want to add.
No, it was an interesting meeting. It was a privilege to be there.
Good. All right. There are just a couple of more updates that Evan wanted to make.
Yeah, if you don't mind, just take a moment of your time. You may have noticed that I kind of did a full refresh of the digital library report. The previous one was getting quite long with addendums, and we also had never integrated talking books into the larger digital library, so you had two different reports there. They've been integrated now. I don't think there's anything on here. I hope there's nothing that you see that's surprising. It's things that either through the report or just through various things we've reported on over the last several months at a minimum, if not the full year. But certainly if you have questions about anything on here, let me know. A couple of things that aren't on here. One is census. I'm not sure it'll ever, it's an interesting one. General census coordination tasks, particularly on the GIS side, are going to be happening over the next couple of years, and they started more than a year ago. But they're all very targeted, focused items, so I'll be thinking about a good way to report that to you, but I think it's useful for you to know about. We recently finished the Luca project. I think we talked about that here. We started the school district reporting program project, and it's just going to be like that right up to I'll do my best to keep you informed on that. And the other is that we're growing a level of coordination with the state BLM office, and it's still early, so I think we'll have a reporting piece on that as that grows and develops, but just to give you a heads up there. And then the very last thing on here is, this does get a little bit into the detail, but I mentioned the next 911 GIS data planning, which of course we talked about a lot. And in there I make reference to the statewide NextGen 911 plan. Michael, after talking to Michael Fashway about this little, and he's my main contact on this, he just wanted me to make clear that the steering committee here, or advisory council, has chosen to refer to that as a statewide 911 plan. A subtle change, but I do think it's important. There was a time, and there will be still ongoing times where it makes sense for us to call out that it's next gen. There are changes and things that are happening, but more and more we're going to need to start viewing this as the 911 system for the state. And so I'll be making some changes in the reporting to focus it just more on this as a
Great, thanks, Evan. Any questions for Evan? All right.
I've got just one quick question. Aaron and I went to Mako and sat through the week with them, and there was a lot of informal feedback about interoperability study or work a couple of years ago, which is very similar to the NextGen effort.
communications.
Yeah, sometimes I like, if Aaron or anybody has information on that, I'd like to find out more. I think it's a potential, roadblock or something there, just on some past history that I wasn't aware of. But
I can help.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, all right.
Chris, would you like to give your last
my very last
financial
one.
report? going to hear the FY19 first quarter financial report.
Right, thank you. First of all, I have to show you my new little brand baby that pulled me away from the state library, entered the world on Friday. Jackson Joseph Tubbs, healthy, came 3 weeks early, so he's pushing grandma to the limit right now of trying to get everything done. But this is what's pulling me away, and my heart is going somewhere else for a while. So good news for our family. In front of you or on your computers is the first quarter financial report. And I'll just kind of highlight a few changes and a few things that we're doing and then open it up for any questions you guys might have. But on the narrative, you can see we spent about $45,000 out of the trust this quarter. And you can see the projects. You have 4 major projects running right now. And you can see how much we spent this quarter out of each of those projects and where we're at to date with each of those projects. As a reminder, nothing is spent out of the trust without your approval on certain projects. So we'll keep you up to date as those projects roll along. We added a little funding into House Bill 2 from the last time you saw it. Basically, they're just continuing appropriations that carried over from 18. You can see the audit's about $426. That's because the audit we finished up in fiscal 18, so the majority of that appropriation was spent during 18, and this is just a little funding that is left. And then Evan had mentioned the GIS 911. That is the statutory appropriation that we spent just a little in fiscal 18, I think on some legal work that we had on that contract. And now that portion is rolling over into 19 and will be spent this year on that statutory appropriation. A little change we did in the financial statement. One you were aware of, and one we decided to give it a try and see what you guys think. Talking Book Library has now rolled into the digital library and will not have a sheet on its own. We talked about that at the last commission meeting. This financial report now shows that. So there is no Talking Book Library single sheet. It is now included in the digital library. And just like Evan mentioned, he's now includes it in his program report. We are now showing it in our financial report. So the two coincide together. The other one is the LSTA. If you guys remember looking at previous financial reports, the last 4, 5, 6 pages were always dedicated to some LSTA projects that were running. Basically, those were the projects that had modified FTE or people tied to them. We kind of tracked those differently, but as we got to talking and stuff, it was like, do we really need to show those, or can they just be rolled part of library development's budget? Because we don't show all the projects, we were showing some, so there was no consistency with that. So we've decided to roll those into library development. So your financial report will get a little smaller and more concise on how we track it and roll it up. So I hope you guys are okay with that change, and Melissa will carry it forward from here on down. On the the LSTA grant funding, as you guys remember, those are just an estimate of what we will spend. We move those around as we close out a year, and so we are right now. That was on my to-do list before I can walk out the door on Friday. Was I have to close LSTA 17. That physically ended on September 30th, but we have like payroll and the last of the invoices that always show up in October. So I will be closing that, and all your projects will now move into LSTA 18 funds. And then Karen, those guys will get the narrative and the reports all ready, and they have to turn those in by December, I think. But I will have the financials done and closed, and they will have their final numbers to prepare their narratives with. And then on the Montana land account, again, that was just built in the budget as an estimate, and we'll be kind of moving the budget around to make it match the Montana land plan that was approved. And again, Melissa will be doing those moves as the year goes along, and she works with Evan on those. This contract is, this first quarter is showing 3 carryover contracts that the digital library are working on. There'll be some more added on your second quarter. They just didn't get all the way through the system by September 30th. But again, these are not new funding. They're contracts that were rolling in 18 and are just rolling over into 19. That kind of does the narrative and the changes. On page 1 of Function 90, I'll just point out that we have a balance showing in personal services. And again, I'll remind the commission that when we had to make the serious cuts in 18, it was always with the envision of once we paid off those all the costs that come above and beyond, that we would start looking at FTE in 19 and filling them based on actual need in the agency. We have filled 2 of those positions. One was a reader's advisor and one was some IT support staff. I am telling Jenny and the crew and the managers to start looking at maybe filling 1 more. So they will be working as a management team to come up with the best FTE that can help the state library carry on into 19. So we're tracking personal services very carefully so we can get, before the session starts, as much as we can filled to the amount that they could pay for throughout fiscal 19. Remember, there's quite a few vacant FTE, but I can't tell Jenny to go ahead and fill them all because there's no funding to fill. So as we get that funding, they'll keep pushing those FTE through.
So I have a question about this, Chris. So at this point, just to make sure, we've retired all of our obligations brought about by paying for reduction in force type payments for people who took up cash.
That is correct.
So that is now off the books. We're clear.
Besides the legal issue that we're dealing with.
I'm understanding that.
Right. But everything else we got paid. We didn't
clear.
have to take a loan.
No loan.
Nope. So everything is paid, and that's why I'm giving the go-ahead on filling these positions. So yes, every obligation that we know of at this point is paid for.
Great. Well
we
done.
were able to do it without the loan. So yeah, that was good.
Well
news.
done.
Yeah.
Wow.
Thank you. So that's where that 41,000 is showing. On page 2, you'll see the Montana State Trust account. We always give you an update of where we sit. So it is sitting at around 1.9. You see that. You can see donations for that this quarter came in about $134. Those are basically the Talking Book Library $5, $10 checks that come in. Good news is you can start to see that STIP account is finally going up. And when you have that much money in there, it actually makes a difference. So this quarter alone, we had $7,000 of interest go against that account. So good news there. If you've been around and watched these for a while, it was like $100. It was very, very low. So that is a good sign to see that start going up. On page 3, you'll see the Montana land account. Again, a lot of that funding is invested in the STIP account too, and you can see it's at about $1 million as we speak. That has House Bill 2 expenditures normally going through it, and then the revenue is the part that is collected by Department of Revenue based on that fee in the statute and put into our account. And you can see that same interest rate, but it earned almost $4,000 in interest. So even though it's only 2%, every little dime helps on that. And then on page 4, you can see the Montana Shared Catalog. Again, that's a proprietary fund, so it means we've collected the fees from the library, and you can see where that cash balance sits at today. Those will have operating personal services expenditures coming out. But I believe, I didn't look right before I left, but most of the libraries have paid. There's a few stragglers coming in that we're still collecting. But that's a good working balance and a good cash balance to get us through fiscal 19. And I will open it up for questions.
I have a question. Can you explain to me why the trust account and the land information account only earn 2%?
Because that is ran by the Board of Investment, and we're only allowed to invest in what's called a short-term investment pool. So Board of Investments has all those funds that they invest for the state of Montana, and we are only allowed to invest in the STIP, so they're not putting those in high market, high where we potentially could lose it. And those STIP accounts are all, even county, and it's just a huge pot of money.
That's
that
by
goes into
statute,
that.
is that correct?
And the Board of Investments decides what to invest with that STIP account, and yes, it's low interest rate, but it's like the safe fund, and that's in law that we can only do the STIP accounts. And those are totally ran by the Board of Investments. Any other questions?
A good reason to have the endowment.
Joe Flick says congratulations, Grandma.
Thank you, thank you.
Absolutely, because it's a nonprofit.
I'll call for motion to approve FY19 first quarter financial report.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
Is it possible to approve with thanks?
To approve and thanks?
Approve with
I don't
thanks.
think Robert's rules allows for that. The motion's approved and now we can go about thanking.
It's been terrific. You've been so great for the people of Montana for these years. You've served them through the state library. You're a champ. You're one of my heroes.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure. I'm not gonna cry. I already had to cry with Jenny because we had to say goodbye. Jenny takes off tomorrow, and my last day is Friday. So it's been amazing. It's been very rewarding work. I never thought it would hit me like this trying to walk out the door. But my husband keeps reminding me, that was my baby. This is my baby.
Yeah.
Now my new baby, but this. I've done it for so long, it was just what I did. It was my life. So, it is difficult closing that door and walking out. And Evan saw me yesterday working, and he's like, "You just gotta walk out the door." And I'm like, "Okay, but one more thing, okay." But I know Melissa's going to do an amazing job for you guys. So I think that's a huge lift off my heart that I know I'm leaving you guys in great hands, and she's going to take it to the next level and just go with it. So I thank all of you guys for my time and for supporting me through all of this, and I'm sure I'll see you around down at the brewery for a beer. So, and I have to thank Jenny. It's been amazing working with Jenny, and she is going to do amazing things for the state library. So it's been absolutely a pleasure, and thank you for the flowers that just came up on my desk. So. And I've got so much work to do. I'm going to leave Melissa down here because I had myself, again, a checklist of things I had to get done, and I'm going to go work on them so I can get out the door. So
thank you, Chris.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you, Chris.
All right, we will move into a presentation by Donna. Are you ready for a presentation from the School for the Deaf and Blind?
Do you need the podium moved anywhere? Because it's kind of in the back.
I think we're okay. I thought we would just
Stand?
Yeah, come on up here. Yeah.
Close to one of the microphones.
Don't move that.
Don't move that. Well, yes.
Because I got it all.
So I thought we would just stand right here. Is this
Perfect.
okay?
Is that a good spot online?
Okay. Yeah, they're actually between like three mics. They're fine.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, so hi, I'm Donna Sorensen. I'm the superintendent at the Montana School for the Deaf and the Blind. And Superintendent Arnson had an idea to have me come and just talk a little bit about Montana Talking Book Library and how wonderful it is, and to say congratulations on your 50th anniversary. I brought with me Adriana Huth, and she graduated last year. She lives here in Helena, so she was able to join me today. But first I want to read an email from one of the teachers, and then I'll ask Adriana a few questions, and then I have some other comments from some students at school.
Great.
If that's okay with you. This teacher speaks for all of the teachers. Her name is Denise Rutledge. She says, I wish we'd had more notice. The students would have put together a video production. We love Montana Talking Book Library. For most of our students, it is their first access to auditory materials. Many of them started with their physical talking book players and received cartridges of books through the mail. It was marvelous to have access to popular titles without waiting and hoping that we would get them in large print or braille. We had staff members that spent countless hours helping to download student requests onto flash drives so that their students could plug and play to listen to their favorite books along into the night. With the advance of technology and the addition of the BARD mobile app, we have a new generation of students enjoying immediate downloads to their personal devices. As a teacher, this is both a blessing and a curse. The students can access books to listen to, but sometimes I catch them listening to their novels rather than assigned classroom reading. Please let the Montana Talking Book Library know how much we appreciate their service and wish them congratulations from the Montana School for the Deaf and the Blind. So I can't say anything better than that, right? So Adriana, how old were you when you started using Montana Talking Library?
I was probably 12.
12, and you graduated last year?
Yes.
So tell me what you like about Montana Talking Books.
I like receiving my favorite books, which are Harry Potter books.
So if you had to read a Harry Potter book in Braille, how big would that be?
Oh, goodness.
People already have an idea. Did you hear them say, oh, goodness? You were telling me that you download some other books, too.
Yeah, like cookbooks.
Some cookbooks. Mm-hmm. So she loves listening to, which one was your favorite?
Cookbook?
Yeah.
Read Drummond.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So I asked if she could cook me anything. She said no. What else would you like to say about Montana Talking Books?
They're an awesome service for people with disabilities.
Mm-hmm. How often do you say that you use Montana Talking Books?
A lot.
A lot? Like every day?
Yes.
Is there anything else you'd like to say? What if you didn't have Montana Talking Books?
I would be sad.
Yeah. What would you do? You just sit at home and do nothing? You have no Harry Potter to read?
Right.
Right. You were telling me about another book that you read too. Another series?
Lord of the Rings.
Oh, no.
Mm-hmm. And then Dragon Fellowship.
So here's some comments from some other students. Anthony says, the reason I like Talking Book Player is that it's very easy to use. I've had mine since I was very young. I didn't know how it worked at the time. I liked the built-in user guide that tells you where the buttons are located and their functions. My favorite reader from the Talking Book Player is none other than Eric Sandwold. Ooh. He really knows how to bring the voices of Harry Potter to life. Now you have something to talk to Anthony about, too.
Oh, yeah.
He does an exceptionally good impression of Lord Voldemort. He makes it sound high, cold, and menacing. A couple of years ago, we got to go to the Talking Book Library in Helena and see where they record the books. It was awesome. Lexi, who is a new student to our school and has been served through outreach until this year, says, the reason I like the Talking Book Player is because you don't have to tap on a screen at the end of a page. I just have to press a button to go backward and forward within the book. To stop the player, I just have to press the big button. The benefits and possibilities are endless. I hope everybody likes the Talking Book Player as much as I do. I like that I can relax my eyes and just lay there and listen to my books. I can relax my fingers too. Kaylin says, my favorite thing about the Talking Book Player is all of the books you can get. My favorite reader is Flo Gibson. Trenton says, I like the book player because I can relax. And Miss Erica Peterson, who is a paraprofessional in our school and also has a vision impairment, says, as both a patron and a facilitator of the service at our school, I can say that it is an amazing asset. I don't know what we would do without Talking Book Library. Thank you and congratulations.
Congratulations.
Thank you, Adriana.
And you have excellent taste in books.
Yes, speaking of books,
We have questions that we're going to go out and ask. Okay?
yes, because I still haven't got some Braille nursery rhyme books in the mail, and kids at the daycare are like asking me when I'm going to be able to read to them, and they don't understand that I don't have the Braille nursery rhyme books.
We're going to go to some.
Yeah, hopefully we can help you. Donna, how many students are at your school?
So on campus, we serve about 50 students, deaf and blind. And through outreach, we serve about 650 to 700.
Okay. You know, one of the things we talk a lot about is extending our outreach to younger audiences. And so if you have feedback for us about that kind of outreach or any kinds of services, we'd really welcome that kind of feedback.
Awesome. We would love to partner more with you. I know that the outreach consultants for the visually impaired have a meeting today. Some of them may be on. Carol Clayton-By was on earlier.
Oh, good.
I don't know if there's a way, if people are online, if they can talk in the meeting.
Yep.
Is anybody online that would like to say anything?
Nobody is turning on. Nobody's turning on their mics, and Carol did have to leave.
Yeah, she sent me a text and said, "Change."
Yeah.
Okay. I contacted a couple of a couple of blind adults, and just asked if they wanted to join, and they said they would try to see if it was in their schedule. So you're doing a wonderful service for our students and for blind and visually impaired adults across the state. So thank you.
One of these students that graduated last year has an announcement for everyone too. I might be working at Good Samaritan in their clothing department. I turned in an application yesterday.
Awesome.
Good for you. Good luck. Anna, thank you for bringing all of the stories from the students, and Adriana, thank you for coming personally to share stories with us. I appreciate this.
Thank you and congratulations.
Thanks, Donna.
Thank you.
We appreciate it.
Yes, thanks for the invite.
Thank you for coming and sharing.
Yes.
This is what I wanted. Personal touches of why we do what we do.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Need to put that in the
Is
foundation.
there a pop machine around here somewhere? Can I pop before we go?
Yeah, good.
Way to make noise.
Is everybody still okay? We don't need a break yet? Okay. Let's move on to the
Excellent.
Power of Montana presentation. There's a number of people here from Bannock.
Yeah, I'll go
if
through.
you'd like to come up and so we can hear you and
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Anne.
I'd like to kind of give a little bit more enhanced introduction of my colleagues from Bannock. We've been all, and in fact more of us, working on the Essential Information campaign that's now got the name Information Powers Growth. My name is Randy Zavo, and I'm the Public Relations Director and the Account Manager for this contract. And we've been working closely and collaboratively with the Montana State Library. Stephanie Brown is going to be is my co-account manager to help with contacts with the library staff. She's also going to take the lead. She's been helping with coordinating the development of some of our online assets for the campaign, the Facebook page, the landing page, and we're coming up on working on a YouTube channel. Next to her is Heather Burcham, who is our Media Director and COO at Bannock. She's going to be providing a little overview today of the planned media placement. And next to Heather is Eric Heidel, our Executive Creative Director, whom I've been dragging around the state of Montana to do a lot of videotaping and still photography to gather up our assets from various spokespersons for the campaign. He's going to lead off with sharing with you some of the creative production that has been accomplished to date. We have 3 videos to share with you today, and we have enough footage and various photography to do 6 more short videos, including, thankfully, footage from Mr. Ken Wall. And I have to also say, following up with Donna Sorensen, that one of our video subjects are the blind and low vision partnership of entrepreneurs that started their own assistive technology business, and they passed their 5-year milestone this year at Over Here Consulting. So we have blind and low vision entrepreneurs who use the Talking Book Library to teach themselves how to run a business and how to program a web page. So we're looking forward to sharing that one with you. So today we're here to give you an update of the progress of the Information Powers Montana campaign and an overview of the details of the campaign launch. But we'll start off with the fun stuff and have Eric share the video.
Thanks for having us here today. Once we settled on Information Powers Growth as kind of the core of the campaign, the core expression of the campaign, we started working on our creative elements. And the creative elements, we'll show you a little bit of everything today. And nothing is set in stone yet, but some of these pieces are fairly far along. And the core of the campaign are these videos that Randy talked about. And we wanted to talk to a variety of professionals, business people, working librarians, people in the field, to advocate for library services and what they mean for economic growth, for cultural support, for everything that libraries do. So we've been very fortunate with the people we've had so far participated in the video interviews, and rather than talking about them at great length, I just want to show you a few of these. This will give you a really good idea where the campaign is going so far.
Okay.
So
start with Jamie.
yeah, that'd be great.
Probably need to be where I am now as an author about public library. You know, my first novel, Hotel on the Corner of Bitter and Sweet, it was a sleeper hit. It's done really well. It's a big bestseller. It's available in 35 languages. But it really began downstairs in this library at this writers group that met here. I also did a lot of the research here in this building. And this place was my go-to at that time in my career. I needed a ton of reference materials on World War II, on the Japanese internment, on Asian culture. I actually had one of those library books out so long, I kept renewing it, that I just bought it from the library because I needed that book. That I actually bought it There's an interesting concept in our society. It's the idea of a third place. The first and second places in our lives tend to be home and work. And as individuals, we sort of search for another place. And the public library serves that function in a huge capacity because this is where people who don't have internet access, they can come here and do a resume, and come here and check out a book on job interview techniques. It's a repository of knowledge in our community that's free and available to anyone. There's really very few excuses for not being able to better yourself or your position in life, in our economy, because the answers are here, and there are librarians who will help you find those answers. And so I think it's vitally important that we keep these spaces available, we keep them open, and we sustain them for the betterment and health and well-being of the society that surrounds them. Best of all, I met my wife at the public library, and you can't do that on a Kindle.
So that's JD Ford, obviously a very articulate, passionate advocate for what libraries do, and we were super lucky to get him. It looks like our audio and video are a little out of sync here, but rest assured, it'll all be good in our finals. But let's move on to our next one really quick. So this is Tom Coley. We interviewed him just outside of Roscoe in the East Rosebud, down by Red Lodge.
For me, the library has been invaluable for being able to create this business around geospatial information. I really think today's ranchers are starting to recognize the benefits of geospatial technologies. It helps them document their assets on the ranch. It helps them better protect the resources on the land. And it also helps them protect private property rights that they do have in terms of water and mineral resources, any sort of legal access and easements they have to the property. I often rely on sources like the Montana State Library to extract layers such as hydrography, soils, aerial photography to build a base map for the ranches. And then on top of that, I add customized layers, perhaps stopwater systems, irrigation canals, ditches, to build that comprehensive map. Mainly because it's important to document annual water usage on the ranch to protect those water rights. Being able to create this business around geospatial information has allowed me to interact with some really unique ranches around the state of Montana.
Tom didn't claim that libraries helped him find a wife, so we didn't include tag for him, but he was sure great to have. And then last we have Jason Riddle.
Information is key to recruiting any kind of business, to deciding how to develop infrastructure, to recruiting employees, you name it. And several of the programs that are utilized by public libraries and the state library are accessed by community and economic developers every day.
you're going to work with a developer or a business owner who's interested in your community or interested in growing, and you don't provide them with data that you can back up, that is solid, that there's no question about, you're playing Russian roulette. Information for business recruitment is critical from the standpoint of they need to know what the demographics look like, they need to know what area landowners look like, they need to know what kind of development has occurred previously. All of that goes into a package or into the research that a developer is going to do or is going to ask the local folks to get to them if they're interested in your community. So all of that data is critical. In our courthouse, we're lucky enough to house the public library as well in Fallon County. It's really nice to see the community that comes in, the children that come in for activities, the adults that come in, they may be coming in to apply for a job online, where they can print out their resume, you name it, but have that all part of the same complex. All of that allows for better integration of the services that the library provides and access for
So as we develop each of these videos, obviously we have a nice common framework, sort of a template for each of the videos, but we're kind of letting each person tell their own story in their own way. The videos will be of varying lengths from 30 seconds up to about 3 minutes. The JV board is about the longest. But that way we're filling in all the corners and telling the story from as many angles as possible. And another part of that is doing print materials and our online materials. We're going to do 2 posters, one of whom is going to be Tom Coley, and the other will be Sarah Calhoun of Red Hands Pants. We're going to go video and film and shoot stills up tomorrow. So just to give you an idea of what our print looks like, here's Tom on the poster. These are still kind of in draft form. Since we haven't got Sarah yet, we know that once we get her images and her materials, it's going to inform what we do. And so these will all probably change around a little bit. But this gives you some idea. And these both have a rural focus. And so these will help us reach rural areas a little bit using the poster materials. And I'll leave this up here if anyone wants to have a closer look. The other component creatively is our online. And all of our materials are going to have Facebook posts, and we're going to hand out a little representation of that shows what some of Jamie Ford's Facebook posts and web ads are going to look like. There'll be a variety of executions for these. Some will have more, some will have fewer. But again, these will help tie to the videos, help get people to the videos so that they can see these stories more in depth. And Heather's going to talk about how we're going to do that in more detail. Thank you.
It's going to be tough keeping him to his allotted time. I'm very proud of him.
Which reminds me of a story.
Get to your point, make your done. So I'm just going to go over the campaign media. Stephanie's going to hand it out kind of while I'm talking, but I'll go over it briefly. We're going to be targeting Montana residents, adults 18 plus. It's pretty broad, but we also are going to focus on farmers and ranchers to reach those in rural areas. The media plan has a variety of different media in order to reach all of these target audiences. It includes online ads, mobile ads, sponsored Facebook content, as well as radio. The radio is going to reach specifically those rural audiences, and I'll get into just a little bit of detail about that in a minute. The banner ads and the mobile ads will be placed on both local and national websites, but only people who reside in the state of Montana will see those ads. That's based on your IP address. They'll be placed across all platforms, including desktop computers, tablets, mobile phones, tablets, all that kind of stuff. These banner ads and mobile ads will run for a total of 8 weeks, starting on November 19th. We want to wait until after the election is complete before we start advertising, as to not compete with all the other ads that are out there currently. The radio spots will be placed on a Northern Ag network. the Northern Ag Network produces 22 shows daily that are streamed live to 42 radio stations across the state of Montana. So we'll rotate a total of 5 ads within those programs each week, and those will run for a total of 6 weeks. Those will be specifically targeted at farmers and ranchers, people in rural areas who maybe don't have access to the internet or really aren't active on the internet on a daily basis. And then we will also use the Facebook page, the new Facebook page, the Information Powers Montana, as a targeted advertising channel. We'll create posts, which you'll see on top of that folder. Those are the sponsored Facebook ads of Jamie Ford, for example. We'll have those for pretty much each video, and so we'll create those, put them on the page, boost them, and those will be targeted at, again, people in the state of Montana. Those boosted posts are going to link back to each individual video. Those videos are going to be housed on a dedicated YouTube channel. So not only will they be sent to the YouTube channel, they'll be able to view other videos as well. It'll help promote those videos, but it'll also help promote the Facebook page. People will be able to like, share, comment, and then it's also going to reach people who maybe are not active on the Facebook page or don't already like it, and then they might be looking for information about the libraries, and then they can also go back to the page and like the page and share the content. The boosts are going to start probably this month, and those will vary throughout the next 3.5 months, all the way into February. So, just a brief overview of one.
Thank you, Heather. I do have a timeline and outline of the launch for the campaign, plus a draft form of the news release. But I don't want to inundate you with a bunch of people walking around with handouts. Instead, I'd like to just kind of go over briefly what the other elements are that will integrate with this paid media and those 3 online assets that we've been talking about. The PR version, we want to do a news release that will be promoted locally. Like I said, we've got a draft of it today, and it's been developed with a lot of the quotes that we heard from people in the video, like Jason Riddle, who's a well-known player in economic development in Montana, and the things that he has to say, or that Gavin Wolter from the Billings Public Library has to say, are some of the anchor spokespersons that we have in the news releases, but also will give each individual library a chance to customize it for their local newspaper. So in the coming next few weeks, we'll be finalizing those regional news releases and talking to the federations about how the librarians will help roll out that campaign. To help them do that, we'll do an e-blast to our stakeholder lists of the librarians and the GIS professionals and some major partners like MACO and NEDA and others. So we'll have kind of a coordinated effort with the 6 federations, with the librarians locally at the county level to try to get as much newspaper and radio coverage as we can, and we hope in the major markets getting TV into some libraries. The e-newsletter will come out, and it's listed on the timeline. We still have some production to come, and we'll be working to get the finalized radio. The radio is a deliberate tactic to try to reach especially rural Montanans and older farmers and ranchers that may not be very connected on the internet. So we feel like it's necessary to have that traditional media element in there. So production on that is still to come, and we'll be working with the library to review all those materials. So now I'll pass out the timelines, and Stephanie will talk a little bit about where we are on the landing page and Facebook page.
So just as a quick update, we've been partnering with the Montana Library Association, who's a partner in the campaign, and they are graciously offered to host the campaign web pages, and that brings them in as more of a partner in the campaign, gives them an active role. So they actually purchased the domain, and they will continue to manage that after the campaign is over, which is a great tactic. It also allows us a little bit more flexibility outside of the Montana State web template, which is a little bit restricted, and gives the campaign more visibility. And so this landing page will serve as a central repository of all the campaign materials in the community toolkit. The videos will be accessible from there, and anybody can access it and share that URL outside of the campaign. It's available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and can live well past our efforts on the campaign. So we've been working with Stephen to code that. We have draft pages that you can see in your screenshot that are currently under review, and we will add the community toolkit items as they are developed and approved to that page so that they're accessible and shareable beyond this group. And we also have the Facebook page, which Heather talked about, will be a central location that will drive traffic to for the campaign. That page is up and running, so we will populate it with posts about the campaign, posts about library activities. We'll also use as an opportunity to share information from other library partners and community libraries throughout the state. And then the boosted posts will also live there. So there'll be a boosted post for each video. Some videos will have two, like Jamie Ford, who's just very well spoken. We'll have two boosted posts. That will help drive traffic to the page and increase knowledge and awareness of the campaign. So if you haven't gone and liked that page on Facebook, we invite you to do that. You can find it under Information Powers MT. That's all I have. So we will take any questions that you guys have now. Yes.
This is really nice work, thank you. The domain that you talked about, the Montana Library Association managing, which one is that?
That is the new campaign URL, so it is Information Powers MT.
It does resolve to.
Oh, it is. Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Just on the top of the handout, yep. So they purchased that domain and they will manage it for the renewal. We at Vantage believe that our clients should own their own domains rather than us own them and manage them. That gives you the power and longevity of the campaign.
So we'll be paying for that domain purchase out of the original campaign budget. And then after our contract ends, the partnership with this campaign landing page will continue directly with the MLA and the Montana State Library.
So they'll pay for the renewals?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah.
And this is the page where we're going to put the logo, right?
So
you take the flower out.
Yes. So if you guys look at that page on your computers right now, there's currently a wildflower banner on that page. We have requested that Stephen replace that with a campaign banner that we created for each page. That was not immediately doable by him just because of the WordPress template that they use. That can't be changed out on individual pages like other templates can. So he is going to go before the MLA board and propose that through April, I think was our agreement, that wildflower banner be replaced with a campaign banner that would show up on every one of their pages. So that's going in front of their board for review.
And that campaign banner that we've developed shows some of the still photography that matches the subjects of the ads and videos.
So it showcases the faces of the campaign.
Yeah, the faces of the campaign, exactly. The main purpose of the landing page is really to provide a place for downloadable materials, campaign materials, for our library partners and other stakeholders.
And showcase the partnership between the two entities.
That we're very grateful that the Montana Library Association is doing this. It's really a great contribution to the campaign that they are providing.
Does that answer your question? You can have another question.
I have another question. Does that answer your
No,
question?
yeah, I'm good.
How many 30-second radio spots does $25,000 buy on the Northern Ag Network?
Heather.
I'm sorry.
How many radio spots? So you're asking how many times our ad will be aired for that $25,000?
5 times a day to run between those hours designated. I think it's 5 a.m. and 5 p.m. But what happens is it runs on 42 different stations across the state. So it's running 5 times a day on all these stations that are advertising those egg programs. They're mostly AM stations, but they're those mostly country stations that run those egg programs.
So we can do the math. My father would be so embarrassed that I can't do that in my head. 5 times a day on 42 stations for 6 weeks.
5 days a week, Monday through Friday, for a total of 6 weeks. So I know it seems like a lot of money. It's $171 a spot, but again, it's running on 42 stations.
No, yeah, I mean, it doesn't seem like a lot of money. It just didn't say how many times.
Oh,
It says the
right.
duration.
Yeah,
Yeah.
if it, there's a little bit of a write-up on the previous page under radio that specifically says, I didn't do the math, but.
We were trying to be very brief today, and we'd be happy to send you any more detailed information.
Add additional detail.
210 times.
To what degree is the campaign coordinating with the local TV show Montana Ag Live or Montana Extension, some of these other sort of go-to media sources, information sources for farmers and ranchers?
I think that's a really good question, and our news releases, we need to make sure that we distribute our news releases and our interview pitches to all of those ag organizations.
Are they contributing to the effort? I don't mean by money, but with content?
Not to my knowledge, but we could follow up on that.
Even I watch Montana Ag Live, and I live in Helena, and I have a couple of raised beds.
That contributes.
Yeah.
I think, the outreach to them through news releases and the pitches will kind of gauge their interest and then work with the local champions in each community to partner with them and get with them to increase exposure. Does that answer your question?
Well, I'm just thinking they're the champions.
Yeah, I think that's great. We do have a list of all the Montana Ag Associations and newsletters and media contacts, but I don't think I have a specific name for somebody for Montana Ag Live. If you know of a particular reporter, well, we'll research that and make sure we add that.
You've watched it.
Yes.
Yeah, so I mean, it's just sort of this panel discussion, but when I watch it, because I have this sort of knee-jerk reaction to information request. I mean, there's a lot of library-rich potential there.
Well, and here's another reason for using that Montana Ag Network. It's going to give us great reach and cost effectiveness, but their news guys are the ones who go on these shows. So they'll have even more reason to support the campaign with their news coverage. We just have to make sure we've got the ag talking points, which was one of the reasons for the Tom Coley video.
They may actually produce those shows. I'm not positive. I need to go back and look at information that I have, but they do part radio and part television, and their television has expanded in recent years, so they may be the ones that are producing that, but I'm not positive.
Thank you.
And I could help you with extension.
That would be great. We feel like the extension service is just a no-brainer partner.
I can help you with that.
Yeah.
Give you some names.
Anything else? Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. That was really interesting.
Thanks for being here.
We do have a comment online from Lisa Mecklenburg-Jackson. So she's the chair of the MLA PR and Marketing Committee, and she doesn't know anything about this campaign. So can the person in charge contact her, please?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Lisa.
Did you guys hear that?
Okay. Does anybody else have any questions?
Just one, Ann, thank you. So when it comes to legislative outreach, because I see that the metrics, I don't know what metrics you're going to use to see if this was successful or not. No doubt that it will be. But during the legislative time, what other overlay will there be, or is there anything in the plan for that? Is there going to be a Montana, on Library Day at the fan window?
Well, we will have our regular Montana Library Legislative Day here. The date isn't set, but it'll probably be around the third week of January. And we've been talking about some specific targeted content going directly to the legislature at the early part of the legislative session.
There was on the calendar for November 29th.
Mailing to legislators.
I'm not sure what that is. That's the e-newsletter?
Are you reading the direct mail to legislators?
Yes, on November 29th.
We do plan to develop a 7x10 flat that can go directly to the legislators. There will be a development and approval process for that. We will know by then which candidates are elected, although we have a pretty good idea and are putting lists together now. We're aiming for the week after Thanksgiving, but we want to keep that Thanksgiving date in mind because that may be when a lot of people are likely to be in their home turf. Any feedback, and in fact we're working on a list of questions for the Government Affairs retreat so that we can be guided by the Montana State Library and its partners in our tactics for legislators.
So do you have any ideas, Elsie, on how legislators would like to be contacted?
By their libraries.
By their
libraries. Make it more community orientated, regardless of large or small. I think that outreach, it just is tenfold, more of a benefit. Not that a conversation with this, because it's the brand that's important, but even putting something on their desk prior to, there's a lot of ways to educate.
Yeah, that's sort of the intent behind the community toolkit, is to take the template information, but to put it in the hands of librarians and GIS professionals so that they can customize it and get ideas about how to talk with their legislators, but also have the people that they work with talk to their legislators.
And since this is Montana Libraries, the depth of school libraries, I don't know, because school library in rural Montana is the library. So I don't know how deep this is going to be within the function of a school library.
Yeah. All of the information is going to be shared with the Wired Montana, which does include school libraries, so they'll be able to make use of it as much as they want to as well.
So let's see how I can help.
Great.
Okay.
Another 4-H.
Yeah.
I was just going to suggest this isn't through the library, but just through our business. We've worked with DPHHS on this tobacco mapper tool, which the React Youth Group, which is throughout rural Montana, takes their phones and they actually corner their legislatures and show them the maps and information about compliance with tobacco sales at convenience stores and their efforts to fight big tobacco. And we're just redoing that again right now, so that'll be available as well. So having them, pass these out or talk about, the utility of the information, because it's for every Senate and House district, maps and charts drawn from a lot of library resources.
Great.
And any other youth groups like that, they're digital natives, and when they get in front of a legislator and show them the stuff on their tablet or phone, it's pretty effective.
Yep. And as well as through extension, I have the 4-H contact and have been working with the director of the 4-H program at MSU.
Oh, sure.
So that can.
Cool. Thank you. Okay, why don't we take a 5-minute break?
We'll see.
Maybe a 10-minute break. How about let's come back at 11:10?
And we have an AG meeting at 11:30, but I thought I could just walk to. I know we're on the next one. We should be able to finish it by then.
Yes, let's finish it by then. Yes.
Oh,
yes.
Sounds good. Sounds good.
It is. Yeah.
I'm going to pause this so don't let me repeat.
All right, great.
Recording's back on.
He had to run quickly to check on his program.
Oh, okay, so we can proceed without him. I was kind of waiting. Okay. Elsie needs to leave at 11:30, and then she'll be back shortly after that. She only needs to leave for about 25 minutes. But she and I were up next, so I'll call the meeting back to order. And Ken is absent, but he will be back shortly. So we just wanted to give you an update today on the work that we've been doing on enhancing opportunities for certified teacher librarians in Montana. And I wanted to get it into record. I think you all saw that we got a letter from Greg Gianforte. It's not to us, it's to the Montana Library Association. So I'd love to give credit to the school library division for this letter. And what happened is the school library division hosted a retreat, and it was a wonderful workshop. There was representation from higher ed, representation, lots of people from schools, OPI representation, Coley Bartow attended, and of course all of our legislators were invited, and Greg Gianforte did send somebody from his office. And so I'll read the letter really quickly, part of it. Dear Montana Library Association, I appreciate the invitation to join you today. I'm sorry I'm not able to attend. It's an honor to serve you as Montana's lone voice in the U.S. House of Representatives. I appreciate the work that the Montana Library Association does in Montana. Your knowledge and expertise help me be a strong voice for Montana. And then I'll skip down a bit. We are blessed to have such an amazing organization, truly dedicated to bringing a brighter future for all Montanans. As your representative in Washington, I will continue to be a strong voice for you. Hearing from you allows me to better represent Montana. And so we're glad to have that letter and to know that we have support on a federal level for what we're doing with school librarians. And then from that,
was this the official letter that he sent to MLA?
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't have letterhead.
So the segue from that is that in the letter he references librarians playing a vital role in providing students with the necessary tools to create successful and long-lasting careers. And that's certainly what school librarians work toward. And so we had this other document that we had been working on, the one that we co-authored back in June, but we had not been able to submit that into, I hadn't heard from you if it was okay. I know I had gotten from your office that, we needed to have a table of contents and a statement of intent. And I shared this with you guys at the last meeting, but I'll share what this document is, and then hopefully I'll be able to share the document with you. But the intent of this document is to provide a current snapshot of available data regarding the status of school library media specialists, and to provide a multifaceted plan to ensure that the role of library media specialists will continue to be strengthened. So that's what our plan that we've worked on is, and then we have the particulars I've already shared, but is it okay to enter this into
I believe
record?
So. It doesn't say draft on it or anything, but as all.
Ann Eubank is the other person who co-authored this, and so she signed off on it. Mm-hmm. You're good? Okay, great, good. So I'll briefly tell you that part of the work plan that we worked on. Well, we have these short-term, midterm, and long-range goals. And one of them that we worked on in the since we've last met is talking about sort of rebranding the school librarians, and I'll let you talk more about that and the name change. Mm-hmm. Do you want to tell them
teacher
what we
librarian.
about?
We license in the state. That's one of the roles that the agency does, and we license teachers. We also license counselors. We license teacher leaders as well. But it all signifies around teacher. So to rebrand teacher librarian puts emphasis on the education component as well as the professional part of what a teacher is. And it also will, in the branding of this, when we look at accreditation for schools, it's not just how many students per a librarian, it's what the librarian does. It's what the teacher does. So all of this in the larger plan is to elevate, is to make sure that the librarian remains the heart, remains the core, and is the partnership within each of those classrooms that might be separated down the hall from that library. So that's one of the things that we're working on. And it's also building a capacity, knowing that hiring in Montana, as our unemployment rate being so low, that it's very challenging, and wanting to make sure that there is a capacity that we can build up for all students, not just current, not just in this accreditation cycle, but in those that are in the long term.
Another goal that we've worked on since we last spoke is Ann Eubank and I both, we had talked about targeting specific schools that aren't in compliance with the ratio that the Board of Public Ed has set. And so we have been reaching out to those schools, and a lot of them have been wonderful about finding people from within their staff who would like to also go through the program. So we've been able to do that as well.
And that partnership is great because you don't need government saying you need to do this for a government regulation. But if you can show from a professional standpoint of why it's needed, or a pathway to a leadership model coming outside of government, that's stronger. That's even it's a better voice. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. And I will pass that over to Marlis.
Good.
That's
yep.
documents.
We'll get it posted.
Thank you.
You trust me?
Yes.
So few do.
So we were going to post that along with the letter, but didn't get it in time. So I don't know if it's appropriate, Marlis, to enter it into this meeting, or if it's appropriate to enter it into the next meeting. Either way, it would. If you put it in the next meeting, it'll just give us an opportunity to give an update on what we work on in the next 2 months.
My personal belief, and we'll ask Ginny for sure, but you're not taking action on it. I don't see any reason I can't just post it with materials that have already been posted.
Great, thank you. Thank you.
I agree. Will you send the, when that gets posted, send a copy to the commission?
You bet.
Okay. Thank you. And so now we can, did anybody have questions about what we've been working on as far as teacher librarians? Okay. Great. All right, so we'll move on to Ginny has an on-call policy.
We have a couple of policies that we're asking the commission to take action on today, and we'll start with the on-call policy. I'll ask for action today, but if the commission wants further time to review these changes, we can always bring it back in December. The on-call policy was first brought to the commission with some recommended changes in June. At that time, we had some cleanup of some inconsistencies in the number of hours that staff are working on call was documented in the policy that needed to be cleaned up. But also at that point in time, we were thinking that the shared catalog staff would have more hours of on-call than what was currently allowed for within the policy to reflect the open hours that public libraries are open in the state in evenings and longer weekend hours. So the original draft that we brought to the commission in June had both the language updates as well as the expanded hours of on-call for the shared catalog staff. However, in the intervening months, we had made the move to the cloud-based CERSI Dynamics system with more administrative support from CERSI. The shared catalog staff really found that the need for on-call was greatly diminished, having that additional support. And so their recommendation shifted to actually not doing on-call anymore at all. They wanted to make sure they had a chance to discuss that recommendation with the shared catalog membership, and they did that at the membership meeting this past week. And the membership all agreed that it was appropriate for them to end on-call services for the shared catalog. And so the revised version of the on-call policy that you have no longer makes reference to the separate on-call services for the shared catalog. It only corrects those inconsistencies that were identified in the previous document. And so if the commission is comfortable taking action on that, we welcome your action. Again, if you want some more time to consider it, since this is revised from the last time you saw it, we're happy to bring it back in December.
I'm not seeing the actual revised policy. I'm seeing a memo that refers to it, but I'm not seeing the policy itself.
Draft for approval, is that it?
Yeah, that's the one. That's just a memo.
But it just goes to the memo.
Oh.
Yeah. I wonder if we go into the last meeting.
It would be
No, it
different.
would be different.
We've been, as you know, we've switched repositories for all of these meeting resources, and it's been
Well,
challenging
It
to
doesn't
keep
seem
it
to me
all.
it's urgent that we act on it.
It
Why don't
is
we
not.
just table until the next meeting and then
If-
act on it then?
When I go in off the agenda that has the links and click on that particular item, it goes to the right document. Off the actual agenda that's posted out there, it has the links
Off
on
of
it.
events.
So if you go down
So
to
this one
current
here.
policy is the
Oh,
one you're
here it
looking
is.
for.
Yeah.
And no.
No, it doesn't. Okay.
So
It looks like it.
so if we don't have a copy of it, I would move that we table this, or how do you do that?
Move to table.
Move to table until our next meeting. But I do have a question about it in the meantime, just for my interest. So right now, when someone's in Plentywood, wherever, and has a problem with the shared catalog, if we were to go with this, who would they call?
You would still submit a help desk ticket to the shared catalog staff.
Who would they call if it was Sunday afternoon?
So are you talking about mission critical system goes down?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Cersei actually is immediately aware that the system has gone down, and then they bring it up. And then they have the phone numbers of the MSC staff.
So do MSC staff have Cersei's phone number?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So they would contact Cersei.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there's.
Yeah.
So I just want to make sure there was no one-hand clapping thing. That there was a. Okay.
No, absolutely. And the likelihood that an individual library is having system issues that isn't
I understand.
previously identified is pretty minimal.
It's just that one of the 21st century sort of modern version of hell is having something happen, and we've made things more efficient, and now there's no place for them to go. I wouldn't want to do that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so there's a motion.
Second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All in
The
favor?
motion is the table, though.
The motion is to table the approval of the on-call policy to our next meeting. I know. I know how to table things. I have a chart.
Well, that's great. Kind of a crib sheet, Check my shirt cuff here.
It's a creepy blanket. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you.
And we'll move on to the next, there's another, which I believe we do have, the draft of a conference room policy. I have the draft of it.
And this is the same draft that you saw in August. Again, it's just an update to an existing policy for use of our conference room spaces. The largest change reflects the fact that FWP staff had staff residing in this building, and so they had similar kinds of priority access to our conference room space. When they moved to their new location, we no longer have staff here, and so we took out their priority access, and they would have access along with any other state agency at this point, and then just some other cleanups and updates to the simple policy. We didn't receive any additional comments from commissioners or staff after we presented it to you in August, and so now we're asking for action to approve this policy update at this meeting.
Move to approve. Second.
Got that?
Yeah, that's good.
Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion approved. Thank you. Okay, now we will go on to our Federation reports. And we have Tracy first.
Yeah, Jonathan was supposed to join us, but he might be running a little bit late with the weather.
Well, do you think we should, are you all comfortable moving?
Well, are you comfortable joining one first?
Then everybody can improve after me, and then I don't have to be the worst one. As if.
So this is Janine Brookie. Just as a reminder, she's the coordinator of the Golden Plains Federation, which is this is for your benefit too. It's the far northeastern corner of Montana, the smallest federation. So I will go ahead and turn it over to you, Janine.
Thank you. Like Tracy said, we are the smallest federation as far as population and the number of libraries in our federation. I have 5 public and 1 academic library. We do cover a large area of land mass, though, in the northeast corner of the state. Would you like me to go over who our public libraries are in the academic?
Yeah.
Okay, we have Daniels County, which is up in Scobie, the Glasgow City County Library, Valley County, the Phillips County Library, Malta, Roosevelt County Library in Wolf Point, the Sheridan County Library in Plentywood, and our tribal library, the James E. Shanley Library in Poplar, is also now starting to act as a branch library for the Roosevelt County library system. So they are a public library now too, but they're a branch library of Wolf Point. As far as our expenditures go, you can see that our number 1 expenditure is technology. We do tend to be a little bit poorer libraries up in our area, and the help we get through the Federation to be able to purchase computers and get tech help with those is tremendous. One other thing that is sometimes used under the technology program is our expenditures for OCLC. A couple of the libraries consider that technology too. The next biggest expenditure is the resource sharing, and some libraries use that for reimbursement for interlibrary loan or the OCLC, depending on how they consider it. OCLC for the interlibrary loan is resource sharing. The next big expenditure is our continuing education, and that is for travel and room and board for the education, MLA being our number 1 expenditure, but other workshops are included in there. We also give our James E. Shanley Tribal Library money for the education. And Anita Sheets at that library wanted you guys to know how much she appreciates that. It's a tremendous help for her, and she says it's something we don't have to do as a federation to give her money, but she means a lot to us, and her education and her help with everything. We do have some money set aside for the Golden Plains meetings and workshops, so being we are kind of a large land mass, it is a ways for some of us to travel for our meetings. And then community outreach doesn't get you a lot of use, but I, for one, use that for buying prizes for my summer reading program. My budget does not have that kind of funding, and it sure helps get kids interested in the summer reading program to have some prizes available for them. And another thing that gets used as community outreach is paying for an entertainer to come and do a free program at the library for music. I know all of our libraries in the past have used Jerry Barlow, who does Celtic guitar music, and I've paid for him out of my Federation funds to do a free concert at the library to show people that the library just isn't the books and the computers for the kids to come play at, that we reach out to the community in other areas. And that's one way to get people into the library. The administration expenses as a Federation headquarters has been a big part of our Federation budget in the past. This last year, I'm sorry to say, I did not make any of our meetings here at the State Library. And so there was $1,200 in Federation funds that did not get spent for me to come to your meetings. And so I had an extra invoice created to the Montana Library to go to spend that money. So it just wasn't sitting there or have to come back to the State Library here and you guys have to worry about spending it. That was a program I thought could benefit a lot of the public libraries and a lot of the Montana library patrons in the state. It's about how we spend our money, and we sure appreciate it. Thank you very much. appreciate Bruce coming to our Federation meeting in
It was fun.
September.
It was fun.
Was everyone able to attend from all of the libraries in your Federation?
In our Federation meeting?
Wow.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, great.
We rarely miss Federation meeting. We meet twice a year, usually the third Thursday of September and April. Our April meeting kind of changes once in a while according to when we get the information from the state library on plan of service, because that's our main April meeting. We get together and do our plan of service then. But and then according to when the MLA falls, whether we can be gone for that Thursday after MLA or if it falls sometimes in there. But.
Tracy and Suzanne were also at that meeting.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks, Janine.
Janine, sorry, I have a question, yes. And this could go to you as well, but are the libraries aware of the Humanities Montana Speakers Bureau programs?
Yes, we do use those.
Because they give you help with bringing one of their speakers in.
Yeah. There's a $75 charge usually through the Montana Speakers Bureau, but our Federation area has used them quite a bit in the past.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Janine. Welcome, Valerie, your first coordinator report.
Yes. So, Valerie,
I feel very ill prepared.
Don't worry.
I wasn't sure what I was supposed to say to you. There's 15 libraries in our federation. Belt, Boone County, Shoto, Teton. I need some help with towns here because it's not. I just started on that.
She's good. This is like we're brand new. So Pathfinder is like just north of us to the Canadian border, and then its western boundary is the Rocky Mountains, and its eastern boundary is actually Golden Plains. So Janine and Malta.
It's a large area.
It is a large area. Yeah.
So we have Shoto, Teton, Shoto County, Conrad Public, Dutton Teton, Fairfield Teton, Glacier County, Great Falls Public, Harlan Public, Haverhill County, Liberty County, Tooele County, Lear Public, and Westbrook Memorial Library. So mostly we are small rural libraries with the exception of Great Falls. Our biggest expenditure is the resource sharing. Most of us use that for OCLC. We have one library that uses it for Montana Library to Go. Our second largest expenditure is technology. We have one library last year who used it to purchase a smart TV, which they're using in their Storytime program. We had another library who they've had severe budget cuts and they didn't have any money to purchase a printer, which went down at their branch library. So that money got used there. And then our third most is continuing education, and we're a long ways from any place. So I did question some of the libraries. I did not get a good response. I sent out a questionnaire of what they would like me to present to the Federation. I got a reply from 4 libraries. I just was curious, the impact of the loss of funds and the delay in the funding. So a few of them said it caused them to have an inability to attend MLA because they had to use those funds for other things. Some places had to scale back planned purchases. Others, it hindered their ability to purchase things earlier in the year because they had to wait for the funding to come in. We just did our new plan of service, and we now have the community outreach, which we did not have before. And I like the new format, and I think it's good that everybody's on the same page. And I like being able to use that. We just have 2 libraries in our federation who chose to put funds in that for this year. But I think that's all I have to say.
Good job.
Have you ever, you all have a really innovative transportation program of the Northern Montana, I think it's what it's called, Northern Montana Central Transit, yeah, which is really innovative. They bought some old Missoula buses and they run a low-cost transportation between cities for populations at risk, and it's really amazing. Have you thought about sort of extending the library into that service, or do you?
Did make an attempt. Harlem, Chinook, and Haver. We had discussions. It worked for me, and I'm not really sure what happened, but there was a breakdown. Part of the problem is that, like for Harlem, the transit stops at the mini mart or whatever. It's not mini mart, but I can't think what it's called at the moment. And a lot of times there's only one of them at the library, so they can't run down and meet the transit to get that. For me, it worked out well because I had a guy at the courthouse who drove the transit back and forth to Haver, so I could either run stuff up to him or just run down to Town Pump. I put several items on there, and then it just kind of fell apart, and it's something that we need to look at again to see, because it's a really good resource that we're not utilizing.
It also
kind
could
of figure out a game plan.
I don't know if there's any grants for like a mini bookmobile concept added to that or something like that. It's a really innovative program, and I think it should be emulated elsewhere.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for being here.
I appreciate it. Did we have Honora online to give a report?
You have her and Sonia Woods.
And Sonia too?
So I believe, Sonia, if you're ready.
I am here.
Next.
Yes, of course I'm ready. Good morning, good afternoon, good whatever. Sorry I'm not there, but we have a lot going on here. I represent the Sagebrush Federation, and we are, of course, southeastern Montana. We have 10 counties within our service plan. And if you can look at our report, the bulk of our money is spent on our technology and resource sharing, which is, of course, MSC, Montana Library to Go, partners, wherever the library feels they need to spend the money. One thing that I would like to point out, you're asking what the impact was of not receiving per capita money last year. And for one of our counties, which is Macomb County, they ended up using Sagebrush Federation money to pay for their summer reading program. So that was definitely a change for them. We do have an issue with one of our counties, which is Garfield County, that seems to eat the librarians alive. They are in the process once again of trying to find a director. I have not been notified if they have anyone yet, but their money within the Federation is almost always spent on their MSC, which has really been a valuable program for them. Anybody have any questions? We are very thankful for the money we receive, and most of us feel we'd like to just leave the check right there in Helena and have all MSC paid out of it.
Marla, do you have a meeting scheduled at the end of this month?
Yes, we are. We're looking forward to it.
I haven't been able to find any information posted about it.
Is the agenda ready for that, Sonia?
Yep, we're getting ready, getting posted.
We'll get that to you as soon as it's available. For Sonia?
Yeah, any other questions, anything?
I have one question. I can't help it.
Yes.
All right. I asked this of both the Federation meetings I attended, and I didn't get a chance to ask you, Sonia. This is Bruce.
Yeah.
So if somehow by some miracle we doubled the amount of support for federations to your federation, how would you spend the money?
In this area, it's almost all gets spent on their MSC or their OCLC. I'm assuming first that's where they would spend it, because for us and even the partners program, I think I have a couple libraries that independently pay that. They have their own contract, not one with the rest of the state. And we have one library director who just brings the books here herself to be a part of it. So I think if they could expand the partners program and pay for that transportation or make that transportation more viable, I think most of the libraries within this federation would love to be part of the partners program. So I think some money would go towards that, but first they would probably pay all of their fees for the MSC and OCLC. Although they like to do some interesting programming, and most of us have, we're very fortunate that we're able to get local grants. Like down here, I have Stockman Bank, and I have a couple other private entities that if we need money, I can write a simple grant and we receive that money. So I think local program, we're all pretty creative about getting it done. So I think we would probably do more services to the public, and that we wouldn't have to write individual grants and hope we get the money. I think we'd probably do a lot more outreach. As it is, we do outreach on our own. Like, we deliver books to shut-ins and we just do it. We don't have any money in our budget. We just make it part of our day. So I think there's a lot of creative ways that we would use more money. I think it'd be more individual services.
Thank you. That's interesting. Thank you.
So I will go ahead and, if you have any questions, Broad Valleys or South Central, I'll ask. We have their service.
And it was very nice to receive the check in the mail the other day. So that was good.
We're glad, Sonia. We're glad we were able to get that out earlier this year.
Yes. Do you have any questions about Broad Valleys or South Central before I let Lenore go last? All right. So Lenore, if you're ready.
Okay. So I'm Lenore Bray from Missoula Public Library in the Tamarack Federation. Tamarack has 14 public libraries that are part of the Federation. It goes from Darby to Whitefish and all the way to the Idaho border. Out of those 14 libraries, we have 5 new library directors this past year, having them using the reporting system for the first time. So we had a lot of phone calls back and forth, helping them get through the report, and thanks to the state library for helping some of them with issues I couldn't help with, technical issues. It's really exciting to have these new library directors. They're very excited about how they can bring new service to their communities, and I think they'll do a great job. And Kalispell, Lincoln County Libraries, St. Ignatius, and North Lake Public Library. So funds are used in the Tamarack Federation to do a lot of staff training, either local, state, or national training to receive CEs for the staff and the directors, as well as the trustees. As everybody else, technology is a large issue, and people use the technology funds, some for internet access, some for new hardware, most for paying their MSC bill or their OCLC bill or their My Montana Library to Go bill. Those sharing options are very important in the TAM-Fed region, and we're really lucky because we do have courier systems that naturally flow back and forth. So we only have a few libraries that have to use senior citizen trucks or something else to get books back and forth. Excuse me, I need to take a drink before I start coughing. The training for the trustees is really important because in small libraries, library directors can try to explain to trustees what is important and what's going on, but it's really difficult to get the trustees to believe the library director. It seems like they need to hear it from somebody higher up. And so when we can get them to trainings that the state library does or that other professionals do, it really helps to get the trustees to buy into sharing resources. And for most of us, sharing resources is certainly extremely important because of budgets and budget cuts. So if we can get people beyond the idea that these are our items for our library and we don't want to share them with anybody else, and get them into the realm of sharing and past the first 6 months when everything's flying off their shelves, and then they realize that, oh yeah, it's, you know, a library away and I can get whatever I want. I don't have to have what's just sitting on the shelf in my own library. And it's a hard concept. It's a hard concept for some library directors as well as library trustees. So the more training people get about sharing resources is really a good thing. The trustees get a much better understanding of Montana library law, which is really important, and we do probably every other year at our retreat, we do a training on Montana library law, some aspect of it, and the state library usually provides the expertise for that. It really helps trustees understand why libraries do the things the way that they do. Budget training is also really important for trustees because a lot of them have never had any experience with a state budget or a county budget before, so they're very intrigued by why we do things the strange way that we do them. It helps the rest of us also understand why we do what we do. The biggest, I think, reason that we love to have training for the trustees is it's important for them to understand libraries' functions in the world and where one little library makes a difference to a whole other realm of libraries because of the resources that sit on their shelves. And that it doesn't matter how small your library is or how big it is, people have individual items that nobody else has that makes it really unique to their community, and that's why it's important to share resources. We do a lot of the libraries in the Federation belong to the shared catalog, Montana Library to Go. Those are two big consortia issues that our libraries belong to, as well as those are the ones State Library manages, and then the databases for Heritage Quest and Ancestry.com, and we've added newspapers.com this year, which across the state many libraries belong to it, but we started it in TAMFed as Missoula Public Library being the person to get the bill and pay the bill. And we get a deeper discount on the databases because ProQuest can send out one bill to a group of libraries, and then I send out invoices to everybody else and wait for their money to come back in so that we can pay the bill. So we can do a lot more great projects if we try to pull our resources together and help each other out. I think the other thing is people are always looking for more service to the public through new innovative IT methods or updates to IT and products. And we all look at how we can equalize services to the users around the state of Montana, not just in our old individual libraries. I think that's about a sum up of what the report was. And are there any questions?
Honora, this is Bruce. I have the same question I asked Sonia. if by some miracle Federation budgets were increased, what would you do different?
Well, I think some small libraries who can't share because they don't have a way to get materials to a hub would probably be able to find a way to do that because they would have some money to be able to pay somebody. Or for those libraries, they could strengthen their collections because they would have more money to buy materials for themselves, which right now, there's just a few, but they're really remote, and so they don't have a way to get things back and forth.
So courier service would be one place that you would address.
Pardon?
Courier service would be one area of emphasis.
Yeah, and then Montana Library to Go has become very expensive. So there are some little libraries in our area that can't belong to it because of the expense. They don't have the money. They can't pay their own phone bill, let alone belong to a project like that. So I think that would be, really encourage people to belong to the statewide projects that help people purchase more power for their people. Also, I guess, as Sonia said, it would allow some of those smaller libraries to bring in more expertise from outside to come and do programming in their libraries and such. They're such small communities, some of them, that they don't have a lot of choice. So it would be nice for them to be able to look at expanded programming. And the last thing would be to send their staff to, bigger trainings, just to be able to go once and see what PLA is like, can really give somebody so much encouragement that they start thinking differently again. And so I think that's just a whole realm of possibilities, Bruce. There's no one thing that would fit everybody.
That's a very helpful answer. Thank you very much.
I have a question for the Federation chairs, and Valerie, you made me think of this. When somebody is a new Federation chair, is there some kind of mentorship in place for a new Federation chair, or is that something that just happens informally? Or Tracy, do you meet with them, or what happens when there's a new chair or president?
Normally, training usually comes from the state library through the other Federation chairs also. Okay. It's and when I became the Federation chair, Gloria, trained me in what I was supposed to do. And there's a notebook.
A notebook, okay. Thanks, Honor.
So I called.
Yep.
The interesting thing on that was some people didn't realize we had a notebook. It's like, sometimes we have tools and then we put them on the side and forget that we have them.
I'm glad we talked about this.
Yeah, I have a question for Honor. This is Sonia, and maybe Honor, my question for you is for a bigger discussion or a discussion of the Federation coordinators when we're all together. The point that you brought up, that new directors have a hard time with their boards believing what they say. I have found that even in eastern Montana, and sometimes I think that's a big part of small communities like Garfield and Ekalaka, where they have gone through several directors. That the number one thing, of course, is that the boards are not trained, but I'm like, well, you hired the person. Why aren't you trusting or believing them?
Yeah. It appears to me that when that happens, it's someone in a community that got on a library board or school board, any other kind of a board, for a vendetta of some kind. And thank goodness we have support from the state library, because it becomes really ugly and difficult.
And sometimes I call them board sitters. You end up with people that just seem to be on lots of boards and they're not effective on any board. They don't always attend. They just are on the board.
It's why it's really important for bylaws to say that people can be asked to leave boards for certain reasons. Being effective should be one of those.
Yeah, we have the packet of all the library law on what a board of trustee person does, and once a year we start with chapter 1 and go through that, and I have everybody take it home and read it, and then we go through questions, and I do each chapter just as a review. And I've been very fortunate that I have a wonderful board now, but it does take individual training. But I always wonder why they don't trust the person they hired. It just is an incredible concept to me.
Well, and part of that possibly is because library boards are appointed by cities or counties. And so if your commissioners or whoever is appointing doesn't ask for input from your library board, then somebody can be joining your board that really is joining for a whole different reason because they don't realize what a library trustee does. So, that relationship between the county commissioners or the mayor or whoever is really important because they never appoint a library trustee in Missoula without asking for input from myself and my library board members. And it's really helpful then because we try to structure our members so that we have someone who has legal knowledge, someone who has accounting knowledge, someone who just has great rapport in the community or whatever. And so if you don't get any input into those individuals who are coming onto your board, then it really messes your whole structure up.
Yeah. We're lucky that the names come to the board first, and then the board just recommends who we feel would be a good member, and then ultimately the mayor decides who they want to appoint. But we do have that input of who we feel would be really helpful on the board.
Interesting to hear all of the coordinators come from all of the states and hear that even though we're separated geographically, we're facing a lot of the same struggles. And once you think you have your board all settled, then you have to start over at some point. So that's a good discussion, and I really appreciate you all from whether you attended online or in person from coming from all over the state and to report to us and to talk to each other a little bit.
The other thing we discussed is the 5-year term, because we find it difficult to get a young person that can commit for 5 years, and we truly would like to have younger people be on our board. We're like, could we have some part-time 2-year members instead of the 5-year commitment, just because it is a long time for them.
So I think the commission needs to take action to accept the Federation reports. Do I hear a motion to accept the FY18 annual Federation reports?
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion moves. Motion's approved. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ann.
I see that there's lunch here. What do you think? We have quite a bit more to go, and then we also have a work plan. We also have a time for a work session. So I would recommend that we eat and work. Can we take just a few minutes? 10 minutes, 15 minutes?
For folks to get their lunch?
Yeah.
Sounds like a plan.
Yeah. Great. Okay. And so it's 12:03. We'll start. Eat.
And Valerie and Janine, I think we have sandwiches for you too.
Jim's going to talk to us about the possibility of amending some administrative rules in regard to the state publications depository program.
Maybe I'll kick things off just a minute.
Okay.
So we're actually writing brand new rules. There aren't rules for the depository program at this point. So these are new rules. The Commission has already taken action to approve the State Publications Management Plan, which is our document for how we collect and manage state publications through the digitization and through the web archive. We did that work preliminarily and went through the public comment process to ease now the administrative rules process, because we knew that aspect of these administrative rules was going to have the most significant changes documented for our process. So much of the legwork for drafting the rules, what will become rules, and at least initially seeking public comment has been done. So now we're at the point where we need to put into a rule both the steps for the state library as well as state agencies and any library that wishes to be a formal depository library. And so with action here today on the draft, that then commences the process of creating those administrative rules, working with the Secretary of State's office to draft them, to publish them as drafts, and to open up the public comment period, and then ultimately results in us bringing those comments back to the Commission before formal adoption of the final rules. Just a reminder that if we receive, I think the threshold for us is around 25 comments requesting a public hearing, we would also hold a public hearing around the administrative rules. So that would be built into the timeline as well.
Of the Commission.
So
right.
Okay, I'm just looking at the word amendments, and so are we amending the first draft? Or is that just what it's called when you add something to the administrative rules?
Right,
Okay.
exactly. This is the timeline from the Secretary of State's office.
Okay, thank you.
So Jim.
Nothing to add. I'm not sure if there are any further questions.
Well, I have a question. Down under rules for state agencies, I'm sure you thought of this. In fact, I'll bet money you thought of this. Under 1, state agencies shall post state publications to the websites, period. I'm curious about the lack of the word all. You haven't thought about it.
I just assumed that, I guess all would be more emphatic.
Well, I'm just thinking, the whole scheme of Montana is that we really try to take and play our cards face up as state government, which I think is splendid. And if I was a state agency and I had something I didn't necessarily want published, this would allow them not to publish it. It says you use post stuff, it doesn't say all. But if you do say all, then would that put state agencies in sort of an untenable position with some stuff?
Well, a state publication is in statute defined as something that's intended for
it's a public
distribution, right?
I just don't know why they wouldn't. I guess what I'm getting at is if they posted it to the website, it is publication. I'm kind of looking at this backwards from where you're coming. You're saying they have to put them all on the website, and I'm saying if it's on the website, it's a publication.
But I'm also thinking that you could, the state agency could have something that is being, some study documents and stuff that was state publications by law, but never made it to the website. So then they become invisible, which is, I'm not sure, consistent with the overall kind of state move towards open government. I don't know. These are just questions I have.
Yeah, no, and I'm just working through this in my head. As you're saying it.
So we have Google groups where we post Google Docs and they change, and they can be changed by someone who's not authorized. So it's a constant influx, but we have them on our website. But to say that they're a publication they're a publication of maybe a meeting, that's in flux.
But I would think those would be state publications by law.
And so what we do is we post everything on the website. But the word all,
It's good that you're here because this is exactly the kind of discussion. Yeah. You can see the tension between the open government thing and some of the practical nature of just everyday business.
mm-hmm.
Oh.
But the present wording might provide wiggle room or cover.
That's what I'm saying. Mm-hmm.
Elsie, can I ask another question about your process? So you have a Google Doc that people are working on and editing appropriately or not. Does that then reach a final form and get published to
Sometimes
the agency website?
Sometimes it does. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it's just a matter of communicating back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
But that communication should be transparent. And whatever we do should be visible. I mean, that's not taking it to the nth degree. That's just saying that.
I think the default should be leaning over backwards to be transparent, as Elsie said, to be open. I'm not trying to take and look over your shoulder as you edit these documents, but I guess I would encourage you just to maybe think a little bit more about that and, as you move this forward. I just think that this may be an opportunity for the state library to provide a little leadership in the cause of open government, which is something I know that you abhor.
I'm not sure it's applicable, but there are a lot of nuances there too. I mean, a Google Doc is never published on a state website. It's a link to the Google servers.
And we don't house it. If Google went down,
right,
we would have no authority to get it back,
right,
or anything. So it's basically transparency that's lost. So it's a matter of communicating. It's a mode or a medium rather than a final.
And there's, people publish maps on their website through an iframe, which again is not really, I mean, it resides elsewhere. As we get all this interconnected stuff, it gets, I mean, I'm not an attorney, but it's fuzzy in a lot of places.
I wouldn't want to make things that they were impossible. But it strikes me that the optics of having sort of ghost state documents is bad vis open government, which does seem to be really demanded by statute and constitution.
From an archival perspective too, you have issues where, like in the 911 area, I've seen, this is not state government, but local governments will publish a database attached to a map, say, that has private medical information, that they just don't realize they shouldn't do that it's a big no-no and they could get a gigantic fine if they do it. So it's, from an archival perspective, they correct that and then it's still potentially there in an archive.
So I want to, just raise a point for your feedback. So the definition of a state publication in statute is that it means any information originating in or produced by the authority of a state agency or at the total or partial expense of a state agency that the agency intends to distribute outside the agency. So there's in my mind, and this is where I want the feedback, there's a little bit of a distinction between making our work open and transparent and producing something that's intended for distribution outside the agency. And if there are Google documents that are, documenting, for example, our development of a reporting system process, I don't think any of us would have any discomfort sharing some of that information publicly and keeping those processes open and transparent. That might result in a report to the commission that we intend for public distribution. I think it's that report that becomes the state publication by definition. And I don't disagree at all that there's opportunity for us to play a role in helping to support open and transparent government. We talk a lot about increasing our role and visibility in the transparency.mt.gov and data.mt.gov. Is that part of managing the depository program as it's defined in statute right now?
in the good old days when state publications were all bound, either with a staple or more formally bound, they were an actual book, an object, a report. The state library I know struggled at times to actually get those collected. Once they were collected, the distribution was not a problem because they were physically distributed. But getting them from the agencies to the state library was often a problem. And now that we're in the brave new world of sort of all electronic publications in many cases, and I know that you folks are thinking about this, but I would want to make sure that if it did become a state publication, and that's very helpful to hear the definition, and the way that you collect those is by scraping websites, then maybe the word all would maybe ensure a more complete, comprehensive collection of those things that made the grade.
Yep.
So, and if with your helpful definition of what a state publication is, it strikes me that wouldn't require an internal in-process document, be it in Google Docs or whatever, to be shared because it wasn't a state publication. So it wouldn't be governed by this rule.
That's my opinion.
But neither of us are lawyers, so we don't really know. But I'm just thinking the word all might be a really helpful thing for future state, for future people in Jim's shoes or in Harold's shoes before, to ensure that we actually have the opportunity to take and capture this stuff and then make it available for all Montanans.
Throw out one argument against all. It's not necessarily against, but it's. I think what I'd say is that if you're concerned that an agency would use this without the word all to avoid getting something captured, what I would say is that they have a great deal of leeway at that definition of stating whether something's a publication anyway. So I don't think they need to say, well, you can say all. So I'm not putting it up there. They can simply say, this is not intended for public dissemination.
Good point, and I wasn't really thinking in an adversarial way. I was just trying to give ammunition to folks that work here when they talk to agencies to try to encourage. But maybe not. Maybe I'm just being
Well,
uptight.
and these will refer back to the definitions that exist in statute. And the definition says any information. And I think that carries the same weight as all.
Intended for publication.
For public distribution.
Do those Google Docs ever become state publications?
They could. It's a manner to get there. But again, it's not housed on state server.
So how did what's that process? How do they move from Google Doc to become
export to PDF?
Yep.
And then posted.
That's what I think a lot of people do.
Then posted to a separate website, not to the same Google Docs repository.
We can look into whether the crawler picks those up. Yeah, sure.
Is there a link to that from your website to the Google Docs right now?
Well, the user can like set a link for anybody to read it, or that just specific people within the Google system.
But what you're saying is that's sort of irrelevant. When at the point that they become state publications, they're converted to PDF and moved elsewhere out of the Google Docs environment.
I have no idea how many people do that, but that's what I do if I want. Partly because at least you have the ability to like make a PDF so it's not changeable.
Because the other two structural problems with using the Google Docs repository are that whoever posts whoever posts the document, it's their account, right? It's their Google Docs account. If they leave,
well,
that whole environment goes away. And secondly, I would be surprised if your crawler is allowed to crawl through Google Docs.
I'm going to investigate that.
Yeah.
And actually, number 2 in the rules for state agencies sort of addresses that sort of.
Yeah.
You basically say that agencies have to notify the state library for new domain names outside of mt.gov the
But
state's DMS.
it doesn't matter if it's still in the Google Docs environment and the crawler can't crawl through the Google Docs environment, then it's still not going to be archived for the purposes you're talking about here.
We'll have to do some research. I'm not aware of any agency that's using a Google Docs repository as their online site for managing their publications. Most state agencies are using like the state's content management system for managing their websites. There's a handful that use WordPress sites. So I'm not aware, but we'll have to do some research. I think they're using Google for the drafting processes and collaboration.
Yeah.
But then producing a final document that's then managed through their
publication
through their whatever their formal website is.
But I manage a little teeny website for a local sporting club, and we reference publications that actually live someplace else that aren't ours, and if we were a state agency and that stuff was supposed to be collected and preserved as part of it, that stuff probably would get missed, even though we sort of consider them part of our sort of record, even though we don't actually own the stuff. So I assume that's just the way it works in state government.
So one thing based on this discussion that we might want to change is where we say their websites, make sure that we're explicit that has to be a publicly accessible website. I think that the issues with like a Google Docs repository and others is that they require some form of authentication, which would be a barrier to a crawler.
Because presumably those are in draft form.
Right.
Yeah.
But sometimes those Google Docs are just available to anyone. Universe. Yeah. And it doesn't look like a crawler will be.
It does
that
not.
doesn't. Yeah.
It does not.
Does not.
So then it doesn't matter if they're made public. Does the state recommend or mandate a collaborative document system for agencies?
Not for
everyone.
Yeah. They have an electronic records management system that's largely for records, and a handful of agencies use it, but it's not really a public-facing documents repository.
I think this is a bigger problem for lots of organizations these days. I mean, the organizational memory can disappear really quickly when you rely on repositories that are tied to individual users.
Good discussion. Sorry I brought it up.
No, it's helpful. It's
true.
helpful
But
to
it's
have that
true.
agency perspective.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if what we're being asked to do is to adopt the rules or to approve the timeline.
Adopt the rules as draft. The timeline is set by the Secretary of State's office, so that there's not really any flexibility there.
Okay.
So it's essentially to adopt the rules as draft to give us permission to take them through the public comment rules process.
I move that we adopt the rules as draft.
Second.
Would we want to make the change clarifying that the websites should be, I'm not sure the exact language, public facing or publicly accessible, just to make sure that that's more explicit?
So are you talking about under the rules for state agencies?
Mm-hmm.
The number 1, state
Yes.
agencies shall post state publications to their public websites?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
To publicly
Publicly accessible.
Publicly accessible.
Mm-hmm.
We need another motion.
I accept your amended motion.
Yeah.
Good.
And then we need to second the accepted, the amended motion was accepted.
I would second that.
Any further discussion? All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
And we didn't talk about what a brilliant job you guys did shrinking this down into bite-sized pieces and making it understandable. I think this is fabulous. It's such an improvement over what was by necessity a really long. This is very sweet.
Thank you. Thank you. I mean, our vision is certainly that it needs to be easy for agencies, to make sure that we are capturing and making these accessible. But then from the library standpoint, we want every library in Montana to view themselves as a government information center, aka a depository library. And we think that these rules and these processes will make that very, very seamless.
It'd be interesting to, if the state library were to work with local entities and crawl local government websites so that information was more transparently available.
Yeah, that's on Jim's wish list as well.
I can't think of anything I'd rather do.
Thank you. Well,
There's actually a couple of counties that don't have websites.
Yeah.
There's actually a couple of counties that don't have a website, if you can believe it.
Oh, which ones are these? Not to organize, but just for.
I think I was just looking one the other day. Possibly it was Daniels or, but I was trying to.
Their county commission has no website. Is
Right.
that what you mean?
Right.
Well, I have schools that don't have websites.
Yeah.
So just to on that information.
I bet those 3 county commissioners don't have computers either, if they're the same
Right.
ones I knew.
And there are legislators that don't have email either.
I bet they have a secret.
They probably can't afford it because 25% of the
Okay. We're going to move on to the Network Advisory Council recommendations for the 5-year list of plan changes.
So you have before you a memo from me, the Network Advisory Council. At their August meeting, I had asked them for more clarification on this particular goal. And as they discussed it, they made this recommendation to simplify it, really just focus on the whole idea and concept of providing lifelong learning. As I mentioned in the memo, we ran this by the Institute of Museum and Library Services, and they agreed with us it's not a substantial change. So it would just be a change in the language to simplify it, and then we would send that to IMLS. Do you have any questions for me?
And just a reminder, this is the 5-year plan that was created, about a year and a half ago, I think it was formalized and submitted to IMLS as part of their requirements for our LSTA funding. It came out of the evaluation work that Dr. Anthony Chow did and was approved by the commission that spring of 2017.
so the action is just on the memo, the changes shown in
It's
bold.
just to change the bold. Yep. So the new goal will read the Montana library community through its interconnectedness. Helps community members understand that libraries are for their lives right now as well as for their lifetimes. That's the new goal.
We need a couple of commas.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it? It's still kind of a mouthful.
It is. It's an awkward phrasing.
Okay, so then do we need just one motion? I'm confused for the 3 actions.
This is just for the change of the goal, not the funding.
This is just the top one. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so moved.
Second.
So move the commas.
But I trust the commas will find their way in quietly.
Okay. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Tracy. And then there are 3
This is funding.
very specific funding.
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
At that same meeting, the Network Advisory Council met to discuss some of the unallocated funding that we had going in. So you have a copy of the budget draft with their recommended changes included, so you can see the overall impact of projects and then the impact on the bottom line, which, as you can see, there will still be some unallocated funds, which I will have them discuss at their November meeting. We'll probably bring back to you at your December meeting. So in my memo, I tried to briefly explain each of their recommendations for why they wanted that funding request and how much. And I would be happy to answer any questions you
How do you know when someone's become a change agent?
That is a very good question. We use certain things like the increase in number of partnerships, community stories, increase in their own activity in the library field and the ideas that they bring forward. That's the hard stuff, but really where I'm trying to get with the data-driven model is just beyond like outputs and how many Montanans we serve and how many items they check out, but like how does Montana Library to Go really make a difference, or how does this work really make a difference? So I don't have a perfect answer for you on a change agent, but that is one of the things. Those are some of the things that I thought about. And that's actually my challenge for the Network Advisory Council is to define how to measure some of those things.
So Tracy, you're requesting the approval of the NAC recommendations, but they're all in, if I'm reading it right, they're all in the new budget draft.
They are. I did not know if you wanted to take each item separately, in case there was an item you didn't agree with.
Oh, I see. So that we would be able to approve 2 out of 3 if we needed to do that. Okay. I'm happy to approve them all as one. Does anybody have any concerns about any of the particular of the 3 funding requests or funding reallocations?
I move that we approve the budget overall as submitted.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor for approving the budget as amended?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Okay. And then we go to our own calendar and work plan. Can we do the strategic plan review and recommendations first? Sure. Is that okay? You bet. Okay. So we need, and Bruce, did you have some recommendations for changing some of the language in the strategic framework?
I had some opinions, but I don't think it's appropriate for commissioners to necessarily micro-edit documents for the state government. I think I made my feelings abundantly clear, and I think the state librarian and her staff are capable of either thinking they're brilliant acts of literature or bogus.
Okay. So Bruce had some opinions and shared them with Jenny, apparently.
We had a committee work group meeting.
Oh.
And so everyone at that meeting unfortunately heard what I thought.
So to bring everybody back up to speed, at the, I think it was actually at the June, and then we followed up on again at the August commission meeting, we had decided that the past chair and the current chair would work with staff to review the strategic framework on a regular basis, and so we did meet to have that discussion. One of the bigger items for discussion at that meeting was whether or not we wanted to add a 4th strategy to the framework, based on some staff opinions that the current strategic frameworks, specifically fostering partnerships and creating an innovative information infrastructure, doesn't necessarily capture the idea of the work that staff do to train and coach individuals, librarians and individuals within the GIS community to have the specific skill sets that they need to carry out their work there. But I would say that there is not necessarily agreement amongst staff, and we brought that opinion, those questions, to Aaron and Bruce for their input. I would say that more of the sense of the group was that the work to provide that coaching and training falls under the information infrastructure, and in thinking back to the kinds of activities and the kinds of goals that we talked about when we were going through the strategic planning process, captured that kind of work when we were synthesizing that into the information infrastructure. So, it occurs to me that it would probably be helpful for staff to bring to the commission a little clearer sort of definition and even some kind of diagrams, images of what is encompassed by this idea of an information infrastructure, so that we can clearly articulate and all ensure that we're all on the same page about all aspects of that information infrastructure and what it entails, and that in going through that activity, it might help to bring clarity to the work of the staff and whether or not we see it relating to that particular strategy. And I haven't had a chance to tell staff that this is what I've been thinking about since we last met, but this is what I'm thinking about. So, that might be a worthwhile activity for us to do.
I will say from our meeting that one of the things that we divided the framework now into 3 columns, and the column on the right is the why we do stuff column. And I thought that I found it personally helpful to think about the way we describe why we do things using Tracy's infamous "so that" model or sort of matrix, because it kind of forces you to get down to it, which is I think really, really great. And I still believe that would be helpful. And the other thing that I heard from several people after the meeting was that this framework is very descriptive of what we do, but it's not very aspirational. It doesn't really say where we're going. Not sort of wildly optimistic, when we have $1 billion budget and those kinds of things, but what is our trajectory, kind of generally speaking? Towards what do we aspire? I thought that there would be room, maybe in this discussion, to think about so that's, because it forces us to be honest, and not that this isn't, but also to think, do we want to have a framework that is just sort of talks about what we're doing now, or does it want to take a point forward a little bit?
Are there supposed to be comments?
So, what I would say, and again, this is part of this review and revision process. So, I think it's right and good that we take this time to talk about these things. I guess I have always viewed the aspirational piece of the strategic framework as the purpose statement. That we help organizations, communities, and Montanans thrive. And my recollection of our discussions around that purpose statement is we shouldn't define what thriving means for those organizations, communities, and individuals. That is up to those more personal decisions, and that it's the role of the state library to make sure that they have the information infrastructure to influence change so that they are thriving, and that we take a very deliberate, make very deliberate effort to create partnerships that continue to enhance thriving communities, and that we model those kinds of partnerships for the communities that we serve. So, that's the aspirational piece to me.
To me, goals should not only be achievable, but they should also, when appropriate, encourage development, progress, whatever word you want to use.
The goals come out of the mission statement, which we call purpose. But the purpose itself, the mission statement itself, is to support each community. And so they will all have different goals.
But how do we know as an agency? We say, why we do this? Because partnerships are necessary to ensure that Montanans thrive. Through partnerships, MSL and those we serve will continue to move Montana forward, for example. How do we know that we've achieved that?
Oh, so you're not proposing a change in the purpose. You're just proposing.
I agree with Jenny that the purpose is aspirational, but I want to take. I would be more comfortable if the whys maybe were a little bit more aspirational. We're a little bit more, not necessarily measurable, but whether we could tell if we were achieving it, if we were going in the right direction or not. Now they're just they're static. They don't seem to be, to me, dynamic enough.
So it's the third column that you're specifically looking to be more aspirational.
Right.
Okay.
I trust that Jenny and staff will keep the second column, what we're doing, always up to date and dynamic and, moving forward. And I personally think that the trilogy, the partnerships, infrastructure, and funding are make a lot of sense to me. It's that why that I think could just be. I think the reason that it's not more focused is because we're still not focused about this. And I think it's part of that learning process. Why I hate the "so that" thing so much, because it's so hard, but why I think it's so valuable as well. I think I'll just be quiet now.
Yeah.
So, I mean, to me, the second column is the real or the measurable piece,
Right.
right? But you want something big picture in the third column. That
Goals
really,
should be achievable.
Well, you don't think that the goals in the second column are achievable?
I think those are objectives.
Oh boy. I don't want to get into the goals.
I know.
So
I think the goals are in the first column.
I think, I just talked a little bit about what I would like to see us do to document this information infrastructure. We are not there. I can tell you right now, we are not there. We are vastly underfunded. We are vastly understaffed. Our communities we serve need significant support to get us there. So that is aspirational. But what we have not shared with you, what we have not created and shared with our communities is the vision of what that looks like, what that could look like. And so I hope that in going through that process, we can demonstrate how it is aspirational, where we are now, and what it would take to achieve it.
That'd be terrific.
Does that help?
That'd be great.
And then for the fostering partnerships, it's very similar. We could go around this room and poll everybody and probably have a different opinion about what a partnership means, what it looks like, and what we hope to get out of it. And so I also think that the next step is for us to put some more definition around what we mean. What are the different types of partnerships? At what point in time, under what circumstances do we employ different types of partnerships? And how do we prioritize who our partners might be under what circumstances? And at what point do we use that information to say, we're maxed out in our capacity. We would love to partner with, agency X on this new initiative.
OPI, I always choose OPI first.
But we're just tapped out. We're just tapped out. We don't have any more capacity, and to use that information to prioritize. And again, I think that gives our staff and it gives the commission greater insight into, what does this mean and what could it look like if we were successful.
And some of the problem with just the verbiage has to do with that this really is aimed at multiple audiences. It's aimed internally to help manage stuff. It's aimed as a means of staff communicating with the commission, of us communicating with, it's who is the audience. And if we knew exactly who the audience is, that would take and exclude everyone else and then let us focus on this other stuff. So that's a problem, just a structural problem.
It's a challenge. For the strategic plan review, you and Aaron did a review with some of the other staff here. So you reviewed, and so the recommendation is to continue review.
I don't think that we left. I don't think we ended the meeting with any recommendation.
Okay. That's
this
the
was,
agenda item.
It
So
was
I thought
there was an action in case we came up with an action to take, but I don't think we're there yet.
Oh, okay. So what do you see moving forward as the best way to continue to review? Or is that what you're proposing?
I think if the commission wants to actually change the messaging and the vision for the strategic framework, then I think we would need to either decide to meet as a commission to undertake that effort, or to have a work group of the commission undertake that effort. If the commission wishes to leave the current framework as is, then I would propose that staff work on these two. Actually, I think there's a third element there to bring back to the commission to see if maybe that those activities, diagramming out the infrastructure, coming up with definitions for partnerships, if that maybe helps to address some of Bruce's recommendations. And then the other piece, the third piece that I think I was thinking about relative to our discussions, the other discussion that we had is how staff make use of this strategic framework when we're evaluating opportunities. And, I think both Tracy and Evan expressed that opportunities come forward, and, we don't pull out this document and say, well, does this work objective fit under a specific strategy before deciding to go forward with something. And my personal feeling after thinking about this is I think that's okay, because I think 90% of the decisions that come before us are decisions that we know naturally align to the work that we do. One of the challenges that staff expressed was deciding if something that we're going to work on fits under one strategy or another. And I don't know that we need to even make that decision. I could almost see sort of a matrix or a timeline as we're planning out for an activity where it sort of, either addresses multiple strategies or it moves through the strategic framework over time. And let me give you an example of what I mean. You've heard us talk about the RTN network of towers. Right now we're in the position of creating partnerships and building a business plan to envision what this RTN could look like. At some point, if we're successful, we'll actually be putting funding towards putting up towers and creating the infrastructure behind this network that will result in information that's supporting the information infrastructure. And if we're even further successful, that might actually develop a funding stream that supports securing sufficient and sustainable funding. So, that's one way how I think about applying the strategic framework to our work objectives. And I could see creating, instead of the way we structure our logic models now, where we list the individual strategies, having more of a matrix form where we identify the different strategies that our work objectives fall under. And I think that would be interesting. Ed? Mm-hmm.
I'm hesitant to come. Mm-hmm. I do want to say, I think you captured it really very well from our side, or at least from my side. I don't pull it out, but it is hard to think of anything that we've evaluated any time in the last couple of years that wouldn't have supported at least partnerships and information infrastructure side of things. But I would say, and I don't really think it's necessarily my place in dealing with the division work to do this, but there's very little that I do towards the funding piece. And even the example you gave, is it really supporting the overall improvement of our, it's providing a funding stream for a new thing. So it's not necessarily helping. I mean, it might incrementally help. And I do make decisions every day about grants, contracts, agreements we might bring in, but I don't think those, it's my sense that those don't get at the bigger funding. And so I just want to make, I guess I kind of have that question there. Should I be thinking about that more? Or is that something that you feel is what the commission is focused on?
I think you've highlighted again another area where we need to better define what we mean by that, because I would absolutely think that the grants and contracts that you work on are part of our sufficient sustainable funding picture.
Yeah, maybe I'm still too caught up in the grander
The $60 million.
Because I want that.
Yeah.
for all that they have been kicked around and even joked about some, I think we got to dream big. And whether it's 60 or 30, we know we need a big chunk for LiDAR, for example, things like that. But and I want to be part of that. But it's not something that's going to come up on its own. I don't think those opportunities probably are going to be regular things that I'm just going to stumble across. It would be a more aggressive need.
I haven't been on here long enough to have had any part with this, of course, but I hate to see strategic plans that get overtalked and that don't come with so much more input from the staff than it even does from the administrative body or this body in particular. These are the things that are what you want to do and what you feel that you can do. And it falls on your internal, if you're charging $5 for the book to go out or whatever, those kinds of money trails that happen. Beyond that, it becomes the responsibility of the board, this commission, to make sure that the money matches the opportunities as well as your administration. But I don't want to see this written to the point where instead of having an open door, it's just about closed on, we can't do this because it's not out here. So I don't like to see strategic plans be any more developed than this. And the ultimate goal is a better library across the state. That's the most ambitious goal we can have. Sorry. I don't like to pick nits.
Wait, I think what we have to decide as a commission is if we want to review the strategic plan at this time. That's the first step, right?
I think we are reviewing.
Okay.
Do we want to revise it?
Do we want to revise it, right? I don't.
I don't. I move the acceptance of this strategic plan.
Is there a second? I don't know that we need to accept the strategic plan. Okay. Yes, because it's standing. I think the action item is optional.
Okay.
Here, I think.
We'd have to move to revise.
We'd have to, yeah, right. Okay. So, what do the rest of
This
you
is the
think on
revised
whether or not
version.
we need to revise
It's
it?
only been updated with our current work plan. It doesn't have any of the revisions to the actual strategies.
And the initial discussion to revise was around adding a fourth. And the report.
Fourth strategy.
And the group that's meant to study it didn't think that was, they saw merit, but they didn't think it was compelling merit.
Okay, so I didn't know that. So there was a group that reviewed it and decided they didn't want to revise it at this time.
Not quite that actively. I mean, I'm trying to.
Yeah,
the conversation sort of was like this conversation. We kind of talked it through, and no one had kind of some sort of thing that they had to say it was compelling. Is that correct? I'm looking at you because you were the one that really, your staff had concerns. We all kind of thought, well, this may not be perfect, but it's kind of okay, and agreed to bring that discussion here. So it wasn't really, there are no needs. We didn't do anything decisive.
I get that.
Yeah.
So there was not a recommendation to bring forward the fourth strategy to the commission, but there were these larger discussions about, whether or not we wanted to take the time to revise it, to be more aspirational, to maybe look at the whys.
Okay.
And again, we didn't have any formal decisions other than to bring that discussion to this commission. Sorry if I wasn't clear.
No,
So
that,
so I
that makes
don't
perfect
see,
sense.
I don't see an action.
I don't either. Kenny or Ken? What do you guys think?
I don't see a need to revise it.
I don't see the need to revise it either.
Withdraw my motion.
Do you feel like the kinds of things I described, trying to further define the information infrastructure and maybe spending some more time thinking deliberately about what we mean by partnerships, do you think that would be helpful?
Yeah, very helpful.
Yes.
I particularly think the information infrastructure discussion would be very, very helpful because I think that's one of the ways where we can really talk about the resources that we need to truly make this successful. You know, sort of Montana Library to Card et al. Discussion.
To that end, do you think that it's something that we bring in an outside person to help us through that process, or do you think it's something that we begin as a work session after the next commission meeting to begin the discussion?
I think I'd like our staff to have some time to talk about it first, and then we can decide what makes sense to bring to the commission and get the commission input on and how. Like I said, I sprung this idea on them at this meeting, so.
It's good for them.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Sounds good. All right, and then I skipped travel planning, just because I was confused for a second, but now I think I have it. At the last meeting, we approved that we would do these things, but now I think, and then this isn't an action item, but now there's the numbers and the funding are tied to them, which they were before. I think if we looked at last year's budget.
Right, and I'll just keep this as a regular informational item for the commission.
Okay.
So you guys know what's been approved for your travel budget, and there's been some travel occurring with the Federation meetings of late.
Did you have anything else to add to this one?
I
think it's great that you're going to keep it on the agenda so that we don't lose it.
Right. Just a reminder, we've got some upcoming Federation meetings. The volunteer luncheon is Thursday at, is it 11:30? I don't have that invitation with me. But I know Ann and Bruce are planning to attend the volunteer appreciation luncheon. And then you have the rest of the commission calendar there. In the second week of November, we have both the Network Advisory Council and the MLIAC meetings coming up. And then the other date that I should know here, I hope in the next week or two, will be the date for Library Legislative Day, targeting probably the third week of January, but we'll know a little bit more working with their legislative scheduler right now.
Could you repeat what you just said about the second week of November?
I think it's the second week of November. We have the Network Advisory Council and MLIAC.
On the 13th.
13th and MLIAC on the 15th.
Those are here.
So
those are here.
So I typically attend MLIAC, but I will be unable to this year. Would there be another commissioner who was able to do that?
I'm just looking here. I typically attend them too, and I think I can.
Okay.
There you go.
Great.
Yeah, I'm open. So that's November 15th.
November
right?
15th.
And I can attend that the 13th.
And I did submit the program proposal for conversations with the commission for the Library Association conference.
Okay, hope we get it.
I'd be surprised. They've gotten more vigorous in their program selections, so one day we might get booted.
Yeah. Okay, is that it for travel planning? Everybody knows where they're going?
Well,
we'll try.
Yeah, we'll get you those agendas as soon as we can.
You don't.
Can you just clarify, so the Sagebrush meeting is at the Miles County Public Library?
It's the Miles City Public
City Public Library, and it is
It usually starts at 10 a.m.
10 a.m.
They kind of have a coffee thing at 9:30 a.m.
Okay.
The meeting actually usually starts at 10.
And it lasts until.
Usually we're done by lunch, and then you can kind of hit the road, and then they typically have a training after lunch, but
Okay.
they're never surprised.
Yeah, thank you. That's helpful.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Any other questions about Federation meeting attendance?
Can I ask who's going to Tamara from the commission? I can't remember.
It's online, isn't it? Yeah.
It is, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm planning to do it.
Okay.
You're doing Robbos.
I missed it because I was sick.
Oh, did you?
I'm sorry.
I was going to do it too, and I
But,
missed it.
Tracy was
Tracy
there.
was there.
Yeah. It's on online.
Yeah.
It was just this week, wasn't it, or last week?
Last week.
Mhm. That's Wednesday.
All three Federation meetings were the same week.
Yeah.
So I did Broad Valley's Golden Plains. and
Wow.
Wow.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Oh, Miles.
So are these last three, are they any of those online?
The Tamarack.
Okay.
Yeah. You're welcome to join.
Okay.
Do we have any other business or announcements? Or public comment? Ken?
I just wanted to circle back to the previous one because I'm not sure how to approach this, but I can think of several examples, and this harks back to last year, not to open in more cans of worms, but and the whole discussion of, GIS Service Bureau at the State Library versus the lack of anything anywhere else in the state except for individual. I mean, except for the governor's office, there is no, and I assume most agencies have advisory councils, and I know all the GIS managers get together to discuss things, but there's, again, I'm probably too close to the 901 stuff, but that's where my examples come from. And I don't know about NISTIC if there was a lot of discussion about this, but there is no way possible, I don't think, that 58 PSAPs or counties, there's more PSAPs than there are counties because a couple of them are tribal, a couple of them are cities, are going to, follow all the data models and rules and pull this together, doing it the same way so this all fits together. Every other state that's done this has had a broader authority, and I know this is a little bit premature because we haven't had our assessments not done and we don't have a statewide plan or anything, but it's a good example, and it's a good example for a discussion of the role the library has in that oversight and in that, North Dakota Department of Administration pulls all the data together after local governments do it, and they make sure the edges match and all the other stuff that happens works. It harks back a little to the interoperability, which from MACO, I got a lot of kickback from Jason and others saying, "Oh, this reminds me of the interoperability failed attempt where all the counties were trying to do something together in an interoperable way," I guess. But it's essential for the system to work that this doesn't stop at the border of a county. It did with 911; everything could stop there. But with this one, with the new system, it doesn't stop there. The whole country, 5,000, however many entities there are, have to adhere to certain standards and do everything so that it all works in an interoperable way. So when there's another hurricane, a Montana PSAP could jump in and, help with the protocol, bring up the same maps that everybody has in Florida or elsewhere. And I've talked to a ton of people, both at MACO and throughout the state. Very little awareness of it, not a mention of NextGen at MACO, which surprised the heck out of me. And it's on people's radar now because the state announced $6.8 million, which seems like a lot, but it's going to go quick as counties get their wish list together for, emergency operation vehicles and everything else that have really nothing to do with NextGen, but the toy chest is open kind of thing. Probably shouldn't have said that, but it takes a broader effort, and whether it's regional, statewide, whatever. Other states have done it through contracts, which, we have such a good track record of collaboratively working on this, and there's so many issues as this data. We're going to improve several of our MS data layers dramatically over the next 3 years, and it's going to happen around the entire country. And it's such a critical thing because it's public safety. I mean, it's right at the core of every rural county, what they want to happen with their citizens. So, and when I look at it, I think sort of as a commissioner, why doesn't some of that $6.8 million come to the state library to hire staff who could do this, instead of hiring a contractor from outside to come in and do it at 5 times the cost of what we've done and have done very well for years.
Is it true that every county really needs to do kind of the same thing?
They absolutely have to.
Not just but like the steps that each county and the information they need to gather really is the same county by county by county.
Exactly. From the GIS perspective, the data has to be, edge match. It has to be, everybody has to follow the same rules, and they're not going to. I mean, many of them don't have the capability to. So it's broader than the state library, but there's no other agency out there. I remember the arguments, again, not to rehash stuff, but when we brought Stu and the folks from ITSD over into the state library, and I was on the group that helped make that happen. And being a commissioner here, it's also, it's knowing more about the budgets and having gone through the struggles last year with the budget cuts. We kind of function as an informal service bureau, but we're not a service bureau. We're a library. We're a state library. So I don't know. Where I'm exactly going with this, but it's a good example of a broader discussion, and I don't know how to have that with other agencies. For example, this 911 plays in with DNRC as the steward for fire, but they're not. They don't maintain it actively in a way that So we're going to improve all these layers at the local government level. Where does it go from there? How do we tie this together? How do we make it all work as a state system, so that we can get a life flight into a.
But in the case of 911, the horse has left the barn, right? At this point, in terms of funding, that whole process is wound up and running down the road.
I'm not so sure. I mean, the national plan said they're going to be spending, $1.7 billion for the GIS part of that, 9 to 12 billion nationally to make it happen. We couldn't, as a state, apply for the federal funds that came down. There was 12 million that came this year because we don't have a statewide plan, so we're behind other states in terms of having availability for that funding. But I don't think the horse is out of the barn. I don't know how we're going to get it done. I mean, my estimate, we're going to need 4 to 5 million just to do the GIS in Montana, and how many, Daniels counties, Marr counties have the kind of money. I mean, it's going to be tough.
Ours is done, actually.
I bet it's not. But.
The former sheriff took it on as a priority. He made me change my address.
Yeah.
From one I like to one I don't.
What most people don't realize is I've heard that again and again from and I would very seriously doubt if anybody's really ready, because 80% of the work is around the edges. It's dealing with all this stuff, and I don't think people really understand technically what's involved. And it's that coordination, that making it all seamless, that's really one of the hardest parts.
One of my thoughts, look at Evan, I think, in my mind, I separate the GIS Services Bureau idea, which is sort of broad, from opportunities to provide support for a specific program like NextGen 911. I think we would probably get some good support, with maybe some matching MLIA funds and some other grant funds to support, some staffing resources, maybe temporary contract staff here at the state library to do that work, which would be different from, staffing up for a services bureau or providing ongoing permanent consulting in the way we provide the consulting for the libraries. I think there's a need for both. I think the staffing support for like a NextGen 911, something specific, is probably an easier sell. But I don't know if that gets at what, kind of your intent.
Yeah.
So how many how many years does it take to do it? Just to get, for the rest of us, to get an idea of how big this is.
Well, as soon as one of the phone companies in Montana says it's got to happen, we have 2 years to implement it. It's going to happen over the next 3 years in most places.
And how many people would it take to do it?
I think it's going to, from the grants we've gotten so far and from just talking to folks, I think it's, roughly a $4 to $5 million job for the local government.
Is that a dozen people, or what? I don't understand.
Oh, you mean at the state library? How many would it take to do that?
Any place. If you set up an agency to kind of do this, how big?
In North Dakota, I don't know exactly how many people they have, but they probably have a team of 12 or so that are working on it.
So I mean, it just seems to me that that's a serious conversation, because how would we handle another 12 people?
Well, and there's a lot here.
Yeah.
I don't want to.
Can I jump in real quick?
Several hours.
I was actually thinking broader, because when I think about the discussion about the LiDAR acquisition, the LiDAR acquisition is very important, and hopefully we catch up with the rest of the country. But that's the tip of the iceberg. It's going to cost, I would guess, 10 times more to redo the NHD. Maybe I'm wrong, but once we get that data, acting on it is another. It's just another big thing that involves many agencies. So there's several of those happening.
Yeah, and let's just put out a handful of very high level things here. One is, you talk about the funding. It's every state's different. There is a state, Virginia, who has tied in their spatial data infrastructure very directly to 911. And that's the majority, if not all, of their funding. And they make a case for funding imagery acquisition, land cover data, all of that through 911. I doubt that model would work here. I'm not saying it would. I'm not saying we should look into it, but I have my doubts. We're just very different places, very different politics. Another big high-level piece is what needs to be done, who's going to do it, and what that means for the library.
Exactly.
I can say without any question that NextGen will be profound changes to spatial data infrastructure. Not necessarily changing what layers we have, but the way that we know for a minimum the way that certain data sets like addressing and street center lines would have to be maintained. It's at a time scale far beyond what we do right now.
In terms of just needing to be updated instantly.
Correct. Overnight, I think, is one of them.
Within 3 days, yeah.
3 days. And these are things that we update annually, right? So it's not even close. And I just don't know what, for some of that work, how much of that should we think of as the library's role? Some of this, I certainly know we can't do that right now. Should we be thinking ourselves as the place that's going to reside, or should we be thinking of ourselves as feeding to or pulling from that new model? And it's tough because I don't know what that new model is going to look like. But yeah, I mean, I think all of trying to figure all of that out will help us with how we pursue funding.
Yeah.
But this is a great discussion, because back to the framework. If staff says, God, this is something we need to do the job that we've been asked to do. This is something we need to do. It's going to cost $12 million a year that we don't have. But then that immediately becomes our problem, right? We start wringing our hands.
Yeah, I mean, but there's just some very fundamental issues, though, of thinking of a library as your 911 GIS data center. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's not, is that really how we view ourselves?
If we scale it back, though, to thinking about, okay, the outputs from this process, however they get done, are directly relatable to what we do. I mean, we need to probably talk to MLIA and expand our administrative boundaries. The three most crucial layers of NextGen that are totally GIS dependent are ambulance service, fire service, and law enforcement service. Those, in my opinion, should absolutely be should be added on to our counties and our school districts. And because they're going to be done in a high quality way with edge matching with other counties. So even if we just focus on the library function of, that we've done well of making sure everybody agrees.
That's huge, not just, I mean, I think anything that's developed, that's long been a concern, and one of the reasons we've more or less inserted ourselves into this.
Right.
Is to say, it's public safety information. There may be things that are sensitive in there. We get that. But there's going to be a lot of great data, great information that can be done for a lot of good things for the state. We need to be sure that some of the past lessons of public safety GIS aren't
those mistakes aren't made again, where all of, that which can be shared needs to be shared. So there's a very important role for us there.
And my point of bringing this up initially was how do we talk to the, maybe not directly as a commission, but how do we interact with the other state agencies, or even private sector. For example, I've talked to 3 telcos this last couple of weeks, and I didn't put this together until I talked to them, but they're required, it came out of the broadband stuff, but they're required through their ACAM funding, which is subsidizing rural broadband, and they get money back, but they have to document that. So we've got all these counties in eastern Montana that one of the critical things for NextGen is a point location on the rooftop, so you can get live flight there and then the driveway that gets there, and all that. But the point on the rooftop, every telco in the state that has what's called an exchange area, or they're responsible for that, is doing that same thing, and they're reporting to the FCC lat longs on the rooftop. We've got, throughout eastern Montana, very rarely does that happen. Sometimes it does, but it's usually the address where the 12-mile driveway hits the road. So that's a critical need and when I talk to those telcos, they wouldn't talk to us when we're doing the broadband map, but they are very interested in talking to their local government because they got family that they want to get that helicopter to the house. So, and that I never put those two together, but that's a way that, like right now, Daniels County, who has no GIS, has no capability, can make a huge jump forward by talking to NEMOT and making that happen, very easily. So it's that kind of, how do we talk to the other state agencies, and how do we do face it, Montana's a gigantic state with not many people, and we're going to always have to work together and collaborate. How do we make that better? And we've always had the state library has always had a role in making the quality of that better, that collaboration and that following standards and making it work better. So how can we make that continue to happen or improve it as an aspirational strategic goal?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I wish the strategic or the statewide plan was further along. I understand they're going to be asking to update that statute to give them an extension to get that work done. So at a minimum, the vision for implementing the plan will have to come through the 911 Advisory Council that we sit on, but it's certainly not happening very quickly.
Well, there is one benefit there, and that is that we are getting the assessment done, and hopefully that will keep the plan instead of them being done parallel and the plan coming out as
I don't. I would welcome staff advising the commission about what our role might be with all of this, but I would strongly resist assuming a role without getting the financial support so that we could do it right. And although I would trust staff to make that determination, but this has the feel of the kind of thing where we say, sure, we'll do it, or do some portion of it, and then just basically, further overextend staff who have other mission critical kinds of things to do for other kinds of things. I mean, everyone wants a free lunch. Everyone wants to die, but everyone wants to go to heaven. No one wants to die. This feels like this could be one of those things. And it seems like there's a danger there actually to our core mission. And if this is part of our core mission, then let's figure out to change the income stream to support it so we can do it right.
That's part of my concern is I don't think we ever really addressed that I've seen, what are we doing with less and what are we giving up? What do we say? There's some discussion about that, but because that's where my concern is, how do we get back to our core level of staff that we lost last year so we can even begin to tackle some of these things.
But if Evan and Jenny said, this is right in the middle of what we do. This is essentially we step up to this. Then we should say, okay, so how are we going to do that?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think the first steps. I don't think much is going to happen until Montana has a statewide plan. I don't think there's going to be any way to convey to stakeholders and funders the need until that plan's in place. the federal study that just came out, I think, will help a lot. But I think that has to happen. And like I said, I had hoped that would be in place prior to the upcoming legislative session. That's not going to happen. But at a minimum, the 911 Advisory Council, I can't imagine that they won't be the advisory body on determining what the state's response to that plan is going to be. Right now, it's very individual by individual, the way the grant program has been created. I hope that there'll be an opportunity for us to change that. I think having MLIAC discuss the implications for the spatial data infrastructure ahead of that planning, so that we, someone like Ken representing the commission, can go to the 911 Advisory Council and say, we need to be thinking about how the plan is implemented, because it's going to have these impacts on the spatial data infrastructure and the opportunities that come with that. I think that would go a long ways towards help informing what that overall implementation may look like in the future. And Bruce is exactly right. Those kinds of conversations have to come with funding opportunities. It might be a place for us to go with a little bit of MLIA money in hand and say, we have some money to bring to the table too, but it's going to take a larger legislative appropriation.
Here's our
It's going to
100,000.
take,
Where's your 10 million?
yeah, it's going to take some revisions to the rules that are now in place. But I think if we can have those discussions ahead of time to inform that process, that would help a lot.
I mean, and unfortunately, it's not going to be decided, but the 6.8 million is going to be locked into these proposals that get submitted the end of November. The assessment comes out in December.
Right.
People start to wake up and realize what they're up against, and it's too late. Well, it's not too late, but it's a good chunk of the money has gone to other things.
Emergency vehicles.
Yeah, that's just, it's just the first round of funds, and I sat on the rules committee that wrote those draft rules, and there was just kind of consternation amongst the members that the plan wasn't there. The plan was intended to be written in order to inform the rules process that govern the distribution of the grants, and we don't have that plan. And hopefully by the next year, when there's funding available, we'll have a plan. And we went into the rulemaking process knowing they're going to have to be revised based on what the final 911 plan looks like. So, I sort of consider this point in time just an interim until we get that. But that's been a point of frustration.
Thinking ahead and thinking just about the library role, or what I assume the library role, which is building the MSDI. The two areas I think that we can make a lot of progress. One is work with transportation. I mean, we're kind of led by the people we have. We got, Troy's incredible with the water resources, and that's going great. Transportation that's the biggest layer that's going to be improved by next gen is the road network, and we have a hodgepodge of. I mean, our MSDI for that is not so good.
So
we work with transportation, work with the NRC, the administrative boundaries. Those are the two things I think we can start thinking ahead, build a case, and maybe we can tap into some of these resources, not just for a one-time shot, but to do what we do well, which is maintain those layers as they get improved. It's going to be a big shot of improvement, and then incremental maintenance to continue to keep it at that level.
Creative, sustainable model.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so we're going to be going to the legislature asking for positions to be not to be taken off the plate, and maybe if we get that wish, maybe in support of some of that is where we use some of those funds to help staff to claw our way back towards more almost adequate staffing in GIS.
Yes, I think when we talk about transportation, is this even the right place for it? I talk to people in Oregon. Right. They don't have a central place that maintains any of their data. That's all distributed out. We struggled for years with getting transportation to buy in on a transportation data set. That's why it was done not in transportation. we've had a lot of good discussions with transportation about a lot of things, especially related in the last several years. Is this the time for them to take that on and allow us to focus more on other things, and focus on the coordination of that layer versus the actual development?
Yeah.
So I think these are all big questions that we're going to be digging into.
The Oregon model working.
What is the timeline for requesting the staff for requesting FTE?
We're going to talk about that in our work session.
Okay, excellent segue into adjournment to the work session for advocacy power mapping, where we'll get to talk about reintroducing staff, getting some of those missing people back so that we can do our best. So thank you all.
Let's see. Is there any business and announcements?
Oh, so I did that. And then Ken talked.
Okay, I'm sorry.
No, that's
It was so long
okay.
ago. Yeah.
No, that's okay. That was a good discussion, but it sounds like we can continue it in our work session.
Yes. Trouble with working with other images is sharing this for losers.
All right, so we're going to adjourn, and I'm going to stop the recording.
Done with your plate. I'll take it over there.
So who's charged with
sorry.
working
Are you
on
needing
these
to open
things?
the meeting up?
I just wanted to
Next
stop
Tuesday.
recording.
Every local government,
But are you
No
needing
one.
anything for your work session?
and it's different. People have different ones. Some
Jen, are
have
you going to need
DS
anything on
coordinators,
this for
some
your work
are,
session?
everyone
Nope.
is real different. Mostly it's. Need to go like that.